Let's see. Okay, I had to start it all over. Let me see. Invite the co-host. Yes. Thank y'all for coming in here. I started the other room, and I don't know what the hell happened. I was sitting in there. I started the other room, and I was sitting there lonely as hell, twiddling my thumbs, like don't nobody want to listen to me. It was like shit. I was like, damn. It says 70 people want to come, and ain't nobody here. Jesus. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. What's up, Nikki? Both Nikki's. What's up, Eve? Waiting on Dr. Short to get in here. Let me tweet him the new space because well, let me text it to him because yeah, the other space got real randomly stupid on me. So I got people looking for me in the other space that I had. We had to start a new one because yeah, y'all not. Come on, Twitter. Twitter, why y'all tripping on? We trying to celebrate Michael Jackson, and Twitter's over here bull BSing, bull jiving, bull doohicking. Let's see here. I don't know what's going on. Okay, we got the co-host Eve. There we go. Eve co-host. Okay, cool. I mean,
Goodness. Oh my goodness. It
I don't
kicked
know
me
what's going
out
on.
twice and then said I was all live, but a listener and a speaker. I don't know.
Wow.
Did you text
Nicole,
it to Dr. Short? Because I can send it to him too if you need.
yeah, I
Hey,
just
Nikki.
texted to him.
And hey, other
I
Nikki.
just
Hey,
texted to
how
him.
y'all doing?
How you doing, Nikki?
Good.
I just saw DeAndre Nicole in here. I want her to speak too. 'Cause I know she's such a huge Michael Jackson fan. I just saw. Hold on. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, honestly, I thought I just saw her in the room. You're talking
Yeah, I
about
did.
yeah. Okay.
Cause somebody
I think
inboxed.
the room may have kicked her out because the
Uh,
rooms have been doing like some weird things lately. Like, because I was just in a space and people were getting kicked out of. I remember the co-host got kicked out of the last space and she
oh
had to
shit!
re-enter.
It just kicked Eve off from co-host, and she just came back. I appreciate y'all. I really do. Um, can somebody inbox Nicole's view and let her know that I would love for her to speak.
Definitely. And Dr. Short is in the
Oh, there
room.
he
I sent
is.
him a mic.
There he is, Dr. Short. So, for those of you coming in, thank you guys for coming in. Let me set the table for you guys, and of course, we'll reset the room as we go along. But you may be asking, why Dr. Short? Why is Dr. Short talking about Michael Jackson? Well, when it comes to the music and when it comes to the music history and a lot of music taste, Dr. Short is every bit as versed in that as he is on the political scene. And he's somebody that, when my interview I have with the legendary Mr. Bobby Rush, that was Dr. Short that got me that interview. Dr. Short knows a lot of people in this game, and he has a perspective. And so what we're doing today is we're talking about the Thriller album from two different perspectives, two different coasts, two different age categories, two different approaches to Michael Jackson. And we're celebrating Michael Jackson because it came to me to celebrate Michael because the 40th anniversary of Thriller's coming out, but you know how it is when them folks celebrate our heroes. They always throw in bullshit agenda. They always throw in nonsense. It's always something to go along with it. They can't just say, "Hey, that black man was great at something." They got to throw in the bull jive. So we wanted a sucker-free celebration of Michael Jackson. We wanted a celebration to where we truly celebrate his greatness, and we do it from our point of view, our perspective, and we catalog this. And this is what I want you guys to share to your children when it comes to the greatness of Michael Jackson. Because VH1, MTV, and those places, they're going to throw in nonsense. Um, we will minimize some of the cussing because we want the kids to understand it, but there will be cussing because guess what? Your kids cuss at school. When you ain't around, they can take it. So when it comes, let's not get brand new. I heard some of the best cuss words after Wednesday night Bible study when Deacon Johnson didn't know somebody was looking. So if you did, let's not front. And so yeah, that's what we're here for. We're celebrating Michael Jackson, the history, and then I'm gonna later on get some of you guys to speak. I would love to listen to y'all perspective and y'all point of view, and from there we're gonna get started. Welcome, Dr. Short. Is Dr. Short there? Can y'all hear Dr. Nikki? Can y'all hear Dr.
I'm
Short?
here.
I hear
Hey,
you.
how you
There
Oh, there
he
he
doing?
is.
is.
There he
Hey,
is. There he
Dr.
is.
Short.
Okay. Yeah, the phone logged me out. I'm sorry.
Okay.
How is everybody? Hey, Nikki. Wazzy, Nikki. See Eve. Hey.
Hey,
Yeah.
Dr.
Good to hear
Short.
your voice
Look,
again.
before you start cooking, Dwan just brought up an excellent point about your influence and connections, and I just appreciate your connections with the elders that I've been speaking with.
And
They've
I got
been
another one for you
amazing.
today. I got another one that I was telling about. Um, we got to do another show. We got to do Watt Stacks. Nobody has celebrated that.
Yes, we
And
do.
when we do Watt Stacks, my auntie was one of the first singers at Watt Stacks, so she's still alive. She said she would do a show with us. My auntie, of course,
Miss Brenda.
is no Kim Weston, who
Oh, Kim. Yes.
sang with Marvin Gaye and with Count Basie and with Billy Eckstine and with Duke Ellington and with who's the name of it? Harry Belafonte and Sammy Davis. So, and she's still around. So we talked for like 3 hours this morning. I was telling her about you, Sister Eve, and Sister Nikki, and of course Dwan. So and
Hey, Dr.
I
Short.
didn't.
Just
Yes.
yesterday, Mr. Carmichael told me that because I brought her up, her and Brenda Holloway, and he said he made sure to make sure next time you speak to them, tell them that Mr. Carmichael said hi. Her and Brenda.
They. I wish they would just speak. I mentioned him to her this morning, and so it's all good.
Those musicians are recluse.
Yeah. All I can tell you is that I was just sharing with Kim because I don't know. My friend, her grandmother died. So, I spoke at the funeral. It's alleged that I'm a preacher. Anyway, and I broke down and started singing some old black music, and the people went wild. And so, Lord. Anyway, but Kim said, that's the first time I've heard you sing anything that sounds good because I sang the song to her. And she says, that's the stuff. You need to keep singing that. But anyway, it's nice to talk to her. And I want to plug her in with Sister Eve and with Sister Nikki. And also, that sister I had you talk to, I have another sister. She's not an ancestor, but she is, or an elder. There's a sister named Dallas D down in Texas. And I'm telling you, she's like Mad Max beyond Thunderdome. It's incredible. I will make certain that you have her contacts. And of course, Mother Azima, the sister from NASA that knows about all the other planets and such. So there's some more coming, Eve. We're not done.
I
And I
appreciate
appreciate
you,
you.
Dr. Short. Look, to the room, we appreciate you being here because they really
Amen.
messed with us early. Can y'all tweet out the space? Let everybody know that we are here and we are ready to celebrate Michael Jackson with Dwan and Dr. Short.
Thank you for that, Eve. I appreciate that, and I also want to say I appreciate everybody in here. And so yeah, we're celebrating Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's Thriller is one of the greatest albums of all time. And me personally, I never say the for any one thing because I just love so much music. How I am. So it could be whatever I'm listening to in that moment, usually is the greatest thing for me. I'm just such a music nerd. But for those who do want to put it at the top, I ain't gonna argue with you. But it was definitely the most selling, the highest selling. My favorite Michael Jackson album was Off the Wall. But at the same time, I'm never going to. We have to celebrate Thriller, because what Michael Jackson did with Thriller was, we got to set the foundation for the young people listening, the context of the time. There was no streaming, there was no downloading, there was walking to the store and buying an album. And this is during a time when the American economy, this is early in the Reagan years and just coming out of Jimmy Carter. So the economy isn't this booming, bustling thing. You know, people have jobs, they got to wait till they get paid to go and pick up their paycheck and then take it to a bank and cash it. There are very little to no ATMs. So to get
They're
music
not
at the
cell
time,
phones.
no cell phones. So to get music at this time requires an effort more than just sitting on your ass and putting an earbud in your ear. And let's talk about the context of the time. 1982. We're still at the very zenith of the greatest music of all time. The 70s and the 80s. We're talking about, we're not talking about a time where, like now, where Drake, they're only going to get, the mainstream is only going to push one or two people, and everyone else be damned, they're left to their own devices. This is at a time you have a lot of competition in music. Teddy Pendergrass stood around. Rick James is emerging. You got the Gap Band. Funkadelic is still doing it. Earth and Fire is releasing Let's Groove. You have on the white side, you have Madonna on the way up. You have Phil Collins on the way up. You have Duran Duran. You have Aerosmith, and you have all of this great music that's getting pushed out. So people had to make choices. This is music that's produced to the highest level. This is music that's great. And a lot of music that was released in 1982 still sounds great today. We're not dealing with a time of a diminished music industry. We're dealing with when music is at the height of competition. You really have a lot of options on where you're going to spend your money with that limited paycheck that you have. And people did, and at the time, only rich people had Visa cards and MasterCards. So what you got paid is what you got paid. Michael Jackson released the greatest selling album of all time during his time. And from that, I want you, Dr. Short, because you was around back then. Me personally, I was just coming up on 1 year old. Thriller's the first song that I remember memorizing as a child. Like, I remember when I learned how to walk, going, couldn't even know the words to it. That's my point of view. You were there. Talk to the people about your time, the context of the time, where you were, and everything surrounding the Thriller album.
Well, Thriller, I need to go back just a little and give you a different context. Thriller came out in November of 1982, but you have to understand what was going on. Between the time that Michael Jackson had the song Rock With You and Celebrate by Kool and the Gang, you didn't have a big black dance party record hit the top of the charts for only 2 and like 3 years. Sit down and think about that. Where I'm going with this is that there was a racist reaction to black music, the great black music of the 70s, made a lot of limp dick racist folk miserable because they couldn't compete. So what they decided to do, and this has happened before in music. In fact, it happened exactly 20 some odd years before Thriller came out. You had what was called, or maybe a little bit more, about 20 years before, you had the payola scandal. The white artists who couldn't compete with the black artists' records went and made it seem as if only records that were being played that had certain artists that would have a very black influenced sound, that they were paying the DJs to spin their records. And of course, people give DJs stuff. The DJs weren't really paid that much. The black music was becoming very, very strong, late 50s, early 60s. And when the payola scandal came in, Congress came in and they shut down and changed the way in which music got played on the radio, which destroyed a lot of black writers and acts. and they were replaced with white teen idols. Like you haven't heard of them, but what's this a good example? Frankie Avalon, Annette Funicello, Bobby Rydell. These are names that you won't know because they didn't have any talent. Bobby V, maybe a little talent. There's another one, Fabian. These are people that had one or two hits. These were people who had hit records between, say, 1961 and 1964. And these were the teen idols. Basically, these were white kids, suburban kids who had some talent that, but they weren't as good as the people like Little Richard, Chuck Berry, all of the great folks who were black from the 50s and earlier 60s had almost an impossible time getting radio play because they changed the way it used to be. The DJs picked the records, and then the white guys with the ugly plaid striped jackets and pinstripe pants and the ugly ties and the big bellies, people who don't even know what the music is, decided what would go on the playlist. And by the way, corporate top 40 music to this day is still dictated more or less by old white men who don't make the music, don't understand it, and they don't like us. So this happened, and the same way that the Beatles shattered some of this, a similar movement happened just about 20 years before Thriller, where it's Motown exploded. And the precursor to the Michael Jackson explosion was another album that basically said black people's music ain't going nowhere. And that was the album released by Motown. I think it's Motown 621, better known as Where Did Our Love Go? It was by the Supremes, and it had 3 number 1 hits. And I think almost all of the records, 3 number 1 hits, and of course a top 10 R&B song. Number 2, When the Love Light Starts Shining Through His Eyes, went to number 2. So the Supremes had like 3 number 1 R&B records and the number 2 R&B records and 3 number 1 pop records, as well as their songs were number 1 in Canada, England, Norway, New Zealand, Singapore, Japan. And so this is a precursor to Thriller. It's the same sort of dynamic that a black artist shatter a glass ceiling that's been established to suppress our reach. And whereas there may have been other people, the precursor to Michael Jackson, whether people want to see it or not, is Diana Ross. It's interesting. It goes from a woman to a man. She's sort of the mommy. Not that she's got the greatest voice, but whatever happened. So, and by the way, it's quite interesting that Diana Ross is the person that Motown would put to sort of shepherd Michael Jackson, although Gladys Knight and Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers are the ones that found Michael. So Michael Jackson is a recipient, as were his brothers, of this nuclear explosion that happened in 1964, where you had a black group with a clearly black sound, where their records were basically 2 and 3 at the same time in the top 10. This is independent black label wrecking the game. So segueing back to Michael Jackson, Simon, just before the release of Thriller, black people grew stronger and stronger in the music business, even with the British coming over. However, black folks, the main people that black Americans fight with for primacy in the music business are, frankly, people from the British Commonwealth countries, Australia, like the Bee Gees or Olivia Newton-John, Men at Work, Air Supply, or the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Dave Clark Five, Petula Clark, Cliff Richards.
Shit,
Are
the
y'all
SOS
hearing me?
band. No. Not SOS band. What's the other one? Loose Ends.
Yeah, I'm
Rod
sorry.
Temperton.
Yeah, Rod Temperton, and so these other people. I hope you are hearing me. I'm sorry, someone
We
when
hear you.
people
We
call.
hear you.
Okay, so black folks are basically we're the ones protecting America's reputation as a great music maker. Most of the great music from here comes from us, and even the people that invade America's airwaves are usually people from other countries copying us. I'm just going to say that. So I'm going somewhere. In the early 70s, disco emerges from, I mean, disco is always there. In fact, frankly, the greatest disco record for the rock era is the twist by an honorary teen idol named Chubby Checker, who's basically was picked by white people to be a cross between Hank Ballard and Fats Domino. Sort of like they pick our black politicians. In this instance, they picked a black star named Ernest Evans. And for a minute, until the British came along, he was kind of hot thing. Again, the song The Twist went to #1 on the US charts twice. But anyway, in the 70s, disco takes over. And from about 72 to about 1980, a large number of dance records and things that are oriented that have that some are called disco, and not all of it's disco, but it's basically black music. It really, in particular, in '77, I'm getting, I think somebody's brother died or something. They keep calling me. Can you just take it for a second, Dwan? I'm sorry.
I got you.
I just,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll be right back.
Now go ahead, because actually we got Nicole's view in the chat room. I don't. Let me. Can somebody? I'll invite you.
DeJuan, she's actually a little busy right now, but she is going
Okay.
to come join us when she finishes. If we're still on, I
Gotcha.
think we're still going to be
Yeah,
on.
yeah, no,
But
we're
she's
gonna
here.
still be here.
Yeah,
She's.
we'll be good.
I
We'll be
appreciate
here.
all of us.
I appreciate you, Eve.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, no problem.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think they're trying to catch me, but
Dr. Short,
yes,
why did you say you think somebody's brother died?
because they keep calling me and they were in the hospital.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm
So
sorry.
that's I'm being quite serious. I'm not joking. But anyway, no. If they don't call me again, that's good. It's throwing off what my phone does. But look, disco was so powerful. Let's sit down and think about what was happening. And by the way, some of the best records, dance records. I mean, Michael Jackson's a part of it. I mean, they think about it. The Jacksons basically kick off the 1970s with four consecutive #1 records. And if you use the Cashbox rating, the Jackson 5 had 6 #1 records. Billboard is biased.
I'm glad you
And
brought that up.
Billboard is very biased. And a lot of our black artists, you don't know how great they are because there's racism in the music business. The reason I want to start off with where did our love go? I mean, you hadn't had anybody have 3 #1 records off of a record album in history prior to the Supremes doing it. The album was the 4th or 5th best-selling album in the country. And yet, Billboard only ranked that it got to #2 for a few weeks. How do you outsell everybody else where you're #4, but yet you didn't get to #1? So y'all have no idea. The same way they cheat with elections, white supremacy is in the music, or anti-black racism is everywhere. They discount great achievements and feats done in real time and clear view. And so the same way that they downplay Michael Jackson, they downplay everybody else that's black and great. And this in particular is most visible. You can see it in the record business because I can go back and say to you, most people don't know Nat King Cole, who may be boring to you. The Nat King Cole trio produced either 3 or 4 platinum albums in a row. #1 albums in the 1940s when you couldn't even get lacquer to make records. That's how good and how popular they were. And that's completely downplayed because they're black. So when you hear about capital EMI Records, what you don't realize is that Nat King Cole's record sales made Capitol Records. For the Beach Boys that you hear about, but there'd be no damn Beach Boys were there not a Nat King Cole and a Chuck Berry for them to rip off the music licks for. And they'll tell you how great a white group that draws off of the energy of blacks instead of saying where they get it from. And so it's a very dirty, racist business. So you have a group of black females who produce an album that sold maybe 7 to 10 million copies. That's good now. Imagine what that was like back then. I mean, these sisters kicked ass. And by the way, the Jackson 5, who are the next super group to come from Motown, had one record after the other. And what ends up happening, I'm going to tell you what happened. They did this with Chuck Berry. They did this with Little Richard. They do this. They didn't want white girls being in love with the Jackson boys. So they started getting white groups that did things similar to the Jackson 5, the Osmonds, Bobby Sherman, there are a whole bunch of, they started anything to keep these 5 black boys from becoming the dominant image that their white daughters are going to be interested in. And so, so the records, they have all these records, they have this huge thing, they got cartoons, they got all of that. And then all of a sudden, the people don't play their records anymore. The music is beautiful. The music, all the music they did was great, but the people stopped playing it, or the records keep making it to number 2. If you go to a white university, like I did, you'll find you'll always get a B grade no matter how smart you are. It's called grade shaving. I'm white. I say it's not an A, even if it is. In fact, a good example, all of you that like music, both oldies and you like the modern stuff, everybody, let me see. Hold on. Let me see. My phone's went black. I want y'all to give me a flash if you know Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, and they have a song called Shop Around. Everybody give me some love. Everybody say you've heard of, come on, y'all can hit the heart thing if you've heard the song Shop Around. Come on, y'all, hit the hearts. You've heard. Okay. Shop Around was probably the number one, it was number 1 record in Cashbox, but it was only number 2 in Billboard. The number 1 record that kept Smokey Robinson, because they're an independent black record company with independent black distributors. The number 1 record was Lawrence Welk's Calcutta. You've never heard of it. Now, you guys, Shop Around came out in 1960. It's 62 years ago. You know about it. And yet you've never heard of Calcutta. Does that give you any idea of how irrelevant the song is? And so understand, if you don't even know what Calcutta is, you've never heard of it, don't know what it sounds like, and you're 62 years after the record was released, then don't you think back in 1960, that Smokey Robinson and them were killing the whole country with this song that established Motown? And what did Calcutta do? It was the only super big record that Lawrence Welk ever had that went to number 1. They'd rather give the number 1 position to a white artist than to a black one. And even the way that music, to this day, they rank a song, it's based on airplay. So that means if Sister Eve were to have Love to Love You Baby, and it's killing California and Oregon and Texas and all the coastal parts of this country, but it's not getting airplay, and Utah and Kansas and Nevada and Idaho, right? And some bullshit white record is being played to death in Iowa and North Dakota and South Dakota, but it's not getting any airplay on the coast, then they'll give the number 1 ranking to the record that's got the most airplay, not the most sales, not the most popularity, and they're always going to bias it in favor of a white artist. So Michael Jackson and these they got screwed when they were killing the country and the world. This young, phenomenal group were being screwed for being black. And Michael Jackson knew this. And they began to call their music bubblegum. Alongside this disco's coming, the Jacksons are being phased out. Well, the Jacksons strike back and they released a song, two songs. One particular song that sold 3-4 million copies called Dancing Machine.
I got a story about that song when you're done.
Dancing Machine sold maybe 4 or 5 million copies. You know what Billboard says? It only went to number 2.
Hey, Dr. Short.
Are you getting me? I mean, that thing.
I have to interject real quick. I have to interject right here because let's talk about the consequences of white supremacy and how that gets passed down. Dancing Machine was a song that was produced by Hal Davis, but my father-in-law, Mr. Carmichael, wrote all of the arrangements for that song. Had he gotten his just due, that's money that should be passed down to his daughters for the work that he put in. That whole dance breakdown, dun, 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 he wrote that with a pencil and paper. That vamp came to him in a dream. And he wrote it, put it into that song. And it's his genius and Hal Davis's genius at putting things together that made that into what it was. And it was funny too because he told me a story about that song when they were recording Dancing Machine. And he always talked about, I was like, what was Michael during that era? Because I know he was going into his teen years. He was leaving the I'll Be There years and going into manhood. He's at that time. And he said Michael used to work so hard every day. They used to pick them up. They had 3 hours a day after school to record. He got out of school at 3. He got to the studio at 3. And by 6 o'clock, they had to be done. And the California State had a proctor down there that would watch and make sure. And at that, as soon as it hit 6 o'clock, recording sessions are done. No more. You can't say another word. He said Michael during that time, when they would joke around, the boys were real silly. But Michael had gotten to the point to where, speaking of to what Dr. Short just said, Michael would listen to Berry Gordy. They would talk. Michael would see what was going on with the Temptations. He would see what was going on with Stevie Wonder. This was during the time that, just after the time that Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye both had to sue Motown, the same record label, to release what's going on and fulfilling
Music of My Mind.
Music of My Mind and what's going on. And so he's seeing all of this play out, and he doesn't have any time to himself. And this is the environment Michael Jackson is in, while at the same time, he knows his music is going, because Michael in 74, 75, he can't go anywhere. This was his last couple of years in school. They couldn't walk down the street, but he's seeing artists that can't lick his jockstrap, that actually get to have somewhat of a public life, go number one over him, while he's having to get directly out of school, go right into recording, and then when he's done recording, go right home to Joe's ass. And this is the environment that Michael's in at that time. And all of this is shaping his perspective. It's shaping his musical taste, and it's shaping his shrewdness when it comes down to the business. I want to interject that part because Michael, at the time, he's seeing these things happen. And it makes sense what we're going to talk about later on tonight as Michael Jackson got older through his, because we're going to focus on Thriller, but we're also going to talk about some of the post-Thriller stuff celebrating Michael Jackson tonight. But go back ahead with Dr. Short.
So, look, the Jacksons, they set the country on fire with Dancing Machine. We were all doing the robot and everything. And they also had other songs, Get It Together, and then it fell back off. Although, Michael had some solo stuff. But what's happening alongside this is this disco by 75 has gone mad. And just, it's just one thing after the other. In particular, years 76, 77, 78, Black artists were killing it, really. Until the whole country was like trying to be funky for a minute. They just couldn't keep up. And then of all things, you had the Whiteys. I mean, you had the Bee Gees, I like them. They're my favorite British
I
group.
like the Bee Gees.
I
This is
love the Bee
important.
Gees.
Yeah.
The Bee Gees were doing black music. Basically, Saturday Night Fever, all this stuff is just killing the country. Everybody goes to do this highly orchestrated black style music. And Donna Summer comes out in '76. I mean, everybody. It's everywhere. And it's a phenomenon that everybody likes, except for limp dick white dudes. Because nobody's playing the stuff that, unrhythmic, with their guitars and blowing fire and looking like devils and all. Nobody wants that. Not really. So what ends up happening in the early 80s in Chicago, of all places, folks began to have people burn their disco records and fight disco. And then it just goes all over the country. Basically, what's happening in 1980s, Ronald Reagan's coming in. You had a major race riot in Miami. You had a lot of tense things that occurred towards the end of Jimmy Carter's run. And there's a lot of hostility. And of course, the people want to take America back, which means kick black people in the ass. And one of the things that includes is getting black people off the airwaves. So you begin to see the only black artist that you see making it to the top of the charts from 1980 until Michael Jackson breaks out with Billie Jean in March of 1983. You've got duets. You've got either Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney. You've got what's his name? Patty Austin and James Ingram.
Yeah,
you may get Lionel Richie. No. Lionel Richie and Diana Ross. You have the number one songs. If it's a black person, it tends to be a ballad or a duet, and often a duet with a white artist.
And let me interject one more thing right here. I want to add into context what you're talking about. I don't want to get too far from it. You're talking about the late '70s.
No, I'm talking about the early '80s.
Early '80s, late '70s, early '80s. What happening also at the time? Philadelphia International. They're going through a lot of your black-owned record labels are going through financial issues. They didn't push Faces by Earth, and Fire. That dropped in 1980. They basically, CBS basically sabotaged Faces, which was their most spiritual album. Go back and listen to Earth and Fire's Faces, if you want to hear a message from God. At the same time, George Clinton, he's getting ready to put together his own record label. He had just signed Roger Troutman, Zapp and Roger. He was going to be part of their record label because before 1980, George Clinton had the music. He had Casablanca Records, Epic. He had different deals for the Rubber Band and for Fred Wesley and for Parlette. He was getting ready to consolidate all of that stuff. And during that time, according to George Clinton himself, it was just something that they hit him with the taxes. They hit him with a whole lot of stuff, and they basically pulled all of his money so he couldn't consolidate. And they got Roger Troutman, took him away from the George Clinton camp. So there are a lot of subversive things going on the black side of music.
And Roger got shot dead by his brother.
Yep, in 1996, 97. But yeah, so at the time, the environment in music, they're purposely sabotaging black music at this time. They're defunding it. What you see for the bands that did stay, for the bands that were around in the 70s that made it through the 80s, you see you see things pull back. You see the Gap band get rid of their major horn section. You see Cameo get rid of the band and go down to the electronic sound. So for the bands that do make it,
you see Kool and the Gang looking effeminate and wearing long hair and makeup and nails and shit. Everybody has to sort of queer themselves out and of course tone down the horns. Everybody, everything has to be broken down.
Let me tell you what happened now, because I was asking my father-in-law about this era, because he was at Motown. He was actually with Lionel Richie during this time, and that move to make Lionel Richie crossover, they started it when they did the song "Easy."
Three times a lady.
Yeah, 3 times a lady. That was intentional between him, Barry Gordy. They all got together to make Lionel Richie that crossover star, starting with 3 times a lady through "Easy," and so that was a move that was already planned out. So Lionel made it. Mr. Carmichael was the only black dude making #1 records in the 80 and 81. But at that time, I asked him because you saw the live music get pulled back out of the industry. And he said it went so far as like at Motown, he wasn't as much affected. He still got to do his string arrangements. But outside of Motown, he said he had talked to other producers. He wouldn't give me their names, but he said they were basically told, okay, no, you can't do, we're not going to give you the budget for the string arrangements, and you're going to stop using these live drums and go to that electronic stuff, because if you don't, you're never going to record again. And for you young people out there, this is at a time where you can't, this is at a time you can't just go into a studio and just create music. You have to have some kind of distribution through a label at this time. So if a producer can't get a budget from a label, there's no more producing music, no matter how good his music was. So all this is the environment Michael Jackson's in early 80s. They're really fucking with black music. Go ahead, Dr. Short.
Not only that, Motown basically was forced to sell to MCA in 1984. That's the year after Thriller. Thriller came out late, basically 83. I mean, all of the independent black labels were crushed. Stax was on its way out. It was gone. Philadelphia International didn't really have that much after, say, 82. So
Gamble they basically took his shit. The label was around in name only, basically, at that point.
Yeah. They only had Teddy Pendergrass. That's who they had. They didn't really have anything else. I mean, the OJs had a hit or two. She used to be my girl, something like that, but not the same way. You followed him saying they're in bad shape. Black music is in bad shape. It gets the rug pulled out from under it. And all of that to say, with black music being pressed down, and then there's this push towards what's called AOR, which is album-oriented rock. You see, what people need to understand is that someone made a decision. The thing that used to drive popular music for a significant part of this rock era, from, say, 1954, literally up to about 1980, or 1975, 76, 80. We'll just put it there, 55 to 80. Single records were very important. In some instances, the record companies made their money off of single record sales. Some artists were able to sell albums. The Beatles are album and single selling. Motown, being the premier black label, were able to develop people who sold singles. In fact, for a certain part in its history, Motown was selling 60% of the world's single records. I'm talking about for the entire planet. A black record company sold 6 out of 10 single records bought in the world were being sold by Motown. Put that in your head, folks. That's in the hundreds of millions of single records.
Was James Brown the other three?
I don't know, but James Brown was doing well. The singles were heavy, but albums became more and more important, in particular after, say, 1970 for black artists. The 70s is when you begin to see albums. Not that there weren't people with good albums before, but, I mean, I could just say to you, the best-selling black album of the 1960s, well, there are a couple, but just for making black music, leaving Johnny Mathis out, you would have to point to the Temptations and the Supremes. The greatest hits by the Supremes probably being the best-selling black album, although, for that decade. I'm just telling you. James Brown had an album from 62, which came out exactly 20 years before Thriller, Live at the Apollo, which sold maybe 2 million copies, which is phenomenal back then. And of course, like Michael, he wanted to do his own thing, and he paid for it himself and had a massive hit. But typically, black folks sold single records. This began to change. And in fact, a lot of there were certain black artists like Roberta Flack. There were certain people that were moving albums. Stevie Wonder's an album artist who made the transition from singles to albums. Marvin Gaye made the transition from singles to albums. Al Green was able to do albums and singles. There's certain people who only could do one. They could only sell. As the single market declined, a lot of black artists weren't able to make it if they couldn't move the LPs. An LP is more expensive. It costs more, has to be promoted, takes more space, just the economy of scale. It can make more money, but it costs more money to make. And what's tended to be the case, I think you all understand, these singles are like a promo. They're like a teaser for the whole album, like a teaser for a film. And that sort of changed. So Michael Jackson, when this Thriller is about to drop, is coming up against a change in how music is sold, marketed. There's this thing that emerges in the early 80s called MTV, music television. And the inside story that I have is that there was a black lesbian on staff of MTV, it's alleged, a black lesbian, who hated black people, in particular black male artists. And she was against and objected to black music videos being played much on MTV. Yeah, I wonder why I complained about studs so much. And so no matter how good, and at a certain point, to show you how unfair things are, the music business literally looked to MTV which is basically pandering towards white suburban kids. Whatever they liked was what the music was going to be played on the radio, as segregated as the society is, even though white kids have always followed black people's music, not the other way around. The 80s, you see, music dictated by white youth from the suburbs state what's going to come on the radio exclusively. And if you couldn't get your videos on MTV, you couldn't get on to the major 50,000, 100,000 watt stations. You couldn't get heard. You don't make the TV shows. You don't make the money. You're made to not exist. Now, what happens in 70?
And that hurt a lot of black people's artists' career. Remember, Rick James fought that fight. That hurt a lot of black artists' career not being able to get on MTV.
Yeah. People were more or less destroyed by being kept away from MTV. And so when Michael Jackson drops his album Off the Wall, which comes out, I think, in 79, and let me remind everybody, the Jacksons had a couple of very good albums. They were making videos before there was MTV as promotionals for their albums, Triumph and Destiny.
Blaming on the Boogie.
Well, Blame on the Boogie, Shake Your Body Down to the Ground, Heartbreak Hotel. I mean, they had some very good songs in those, because let's remember that Michael Jackson and his brothers left Motown in 76. And for a minute, they were produced by Gamble and Huff. They had the song Show You the Way to Go, which went to number one in Great Britain, only went to 54 in America. And Enjoy Yourself was a top 10 pop and a top 5 R&B song. The album went gold. But imagine, I need to remember that the Jackson 5's first 2 or 3 albums were multi-platinum. They had all these massive hits. I'll Be There sold 4 or 5 million copies as a single record. I mean, but it's interesting how quickly they forget black artists you're only as good as your last hit. A white artist can have a hit 20 years ago and people still listen to him. But anyway, Michael Jackson drops Off the Wall. Off the Wall is a surprise international smash. It gets to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, which is for albums. It produces 2 number 1 hits, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, as well as Rock With You. And by the way, Michael, of course, was working with Quincy Jones, who had worked with him for a failed music and film project called The Wiz, a black adaptation of The Wizard of Oz that was popular on Broadway, but it bombed in theaters. And the best of it is that it had some chart action in Europe and Netherlands in particular. So Michael Jackson puts Off the Wall out, having broken away from his family a little bit, and working with Quincy Jones, and that album does well. It was a great album. It's his best album in my view. But 4 top 10 records that had never been done off of an album before, 2 number ones, and I don't think he got any awards. And I think he was bummed out about it if you read. And so he conceived to make a monster album. And of course, he worked with Quincy Jones, and I think for a few months, and I think they worked for a couple of months at a budget of like $750,000 to make this album, and they worked with a couple of hundred songs, and I don't know. They worked with a couple of songs, and they got down to the few that they wanted, and they put this album out, and it dropped in November. And I can say to you, I was in the 12th grade in high school. I walked to the record store that was 3 blocks from my house, and I got the first Thriller album. I can still remember the smell of the incense that was on the cover from the record store, and listening to it. And I thought that the album, I had read about it. There are articles about it saying that Michael's going to do another one. And I listened to the album, and I thought that Michael Jackson would produce 8 top 10 records off of it. I remember talking to my brother, this is great. And I said there are 3 number 1 records on here. Definitely 2, maybe 3. And I think up to 8 of these are going to make it to the top 10. He says, this is going to sell 50 million copies. Okay, Dwan, I know people think I'm exaggerating, but I just knew it. And that's sort of what happened. And what people need to understand is that the music business was not in great shape in 1982. One, the units weren't as high because you have to give people something that they want. And so giving us, you need to understand the early 80s, you had all the Australians, you had AC/DC, Men at Work, Air Supply, then you had the British people, Duran Duran. They began flooding us with another British and Australian invasion. And
there's one more dynamic to that too. This was the time that when the Clive Davis thing came in, the little game he played. A lot of your top black music producers of the 70s were separated from their bands. Like the Chic singers weren't re-signed. So now Rogers and Bernard Edwards are now producing for Madonna. You know what I mean? Earth and Fire broke up, so now the whole Phoenix Horn section, the whole band is playing for Phil Collins. And at the same time, I remember people telling me stories about like them seeing Bootsy Collins at the Motown studios and looking for work, because those guys, a lot of those people who were making good hits in the 70s just didn't get re-signed. And those producers, now you got Maurice White, he can no longer produce Denise Williams. He's now producing Barbra Streisand. And so a lot of your top black, Mr. Carmichael, he's now producing Kenny Rogers. He and Lionel got
Lady. Lady. That's one of the biggest hits of the early 80s. And that was the other thing I could mention. If you started looking at who were having the biggest hits between 1980 and the release of Billie Jean, a lot of it is whites doing black style music, whether it's Hall and Oates, whether it's a guy Every Time You Go Away. He's copying
Sting.
Marvin Gaye. All of these people are
Simply
around.
Red.
Yeah, it's not Simply Red. It's another guy.
Basically got their first Grammy off Simply Red doing his version of If You Don't Know Me Not By Now, and not Teddy Pendergrass.
Yeah, but Every Time You Go Away is a different person. His name is Paul something.
Was that Paul Simon?
No, maybe Paul. Let me pull Paul's name up. Every Time You Go Away was a hit. These
You
Blue Eyed
take a
Soul,
piece of me with
yeah,
you.
I want to know what love is. They get a black choir behind a British band. They over and over again. They wanted enough black styling to have soul, but the performers and the singers would be white.
Elton John.
Um,
Yeah.
this is what you had. Every Time You Go Away, his name is Paul Young. You had
Paul
all of
Young.
these people who would be doing black music from the 70s and 60s and getting credit as if it's brand new. You didn't really have anything particularly great, okay, but they were the ones getting the airplay.
And quick little commercial break. Quick little commercial break. What Dr. Short's talking about right now. Later on this week, I'm going to have my aunt Martinez Stevens on interviewing on a Thriller. We're celebrating Thriller 40 all week, and she was a background singer on the Thriller album, but she also sang background for Elton John and a lot of these white acts a lot of that game that was going on in the early '80s. She was one of the black background singers that they used to soul up a lot of that white music in the '80s. So you're going to get those stories firsthand on the YouTube
Mm.
channel. So
And you
just
know
let you
what?
guys know that.
And you know what, Brother Dewan? We should do a commercial.
Oh shit.
Our channels need you guys' support. My channel, which in fact, Brother Dewan is going to help me do a podcast because you can't even find me on YouTube. Even if I have a channel, they make it impossible for you to find it. So,
We're going to create a Spotify and Apple podcast link for Dr. Short because Spotify and Apple podcasts, they're not as tight with things as YouTube.
oh,
And so we're gonna create that for Dr. Short so that he can upload. We can put these Twitter spaces up there onto that, and he can speak
yes, sir.
directly onto that, and then
And,
everything that he does get download directly to you guys' phone. So we'll make that announcement when we get that tightened up.
and yes, I just want to put that out and also remind you information nor freedom is free. Definitely, I want to thank everyone that's blessed. I literally emptied all of my priority books for the Angry Black Men's Book Club. But you know, y'all can always bless. Drop something on Dr. Randy Short on the Cash App or Randy Short at Gmail. That's a Zelle or a PayPal. Definitely drop something because all this information you're hearing, you get it from reading books and studying and researching. I used to hang in the music library at the Library of Congress and also hang out at the Martin Luther King Library and read Billboard. I did it every single day every single week for about 2 years to keep up with what's going on in the music business because it was an interest. I'm a lyricist. I'm a published lyricist. I'm the only person to collaborate directly with Denise LaSalle on songs, the Queen of the Blues, and I may even collaborate with my auntie Kim. So, but anyway, definitely drop a piece on me, my brothers and sisters. Otherwise, my Twitter space protector, Sister Sean, will jump on me. But absolutely, DrRandYSHORT. Keep it coming because I was able to get all of this. I plan to talk about transnational blackness. That's what I was talking to Brother Dewan about. I don't want to start and then have them take all my content and then not let y'all have it. So invest in freedom of thought and honest conversation. So bless us, and you know you could do it. Get a book, buy something from Brother Dewan's store. Y'all going to see us. And if y'all coming, I want to shout out and say, please be in DC if you can, if you're in the DMV for the November 5th Rally for Reparations. That's going to be at Freedom Square. I know I'm going to be there if I have to take a cane, and the bus goes right by there. So all I have to do is walk and get on the P bus, and I'll be there. Not PEE, but just the letter P. Okay.
I'll
We
be
don't.
there too.
Yes, please. And like
Flying in
Michael
from LA.
Jackson, we'll be there. Please, we got to do this. They rip us off in music. We got to stop ripping off the movement by giving and sharing and being involved. But I just want to say, so let's go back to Michael Jackson. We're talking about how in the 80s, all this horrible stuff is happening, how they're basically stealing the music. They're forcing Motown out of business. In fact, something happened in the 80s. A&M Records started to have problems. In fact, what Motown and all the other independents were forced to do was to go to corporate distribution because the independents were being forced out. As well, when the price of oil went up, the price of producing records went up. So the record companies were catching hell on all levels with the inflation and other things that were going in the early 80s. And into this, of course, great artists like, remember Donna Summer, who had 3 back-to-back #1 albums, never done before by any kind of female, or for that no female artist has ever achieved that since.
It just took her out, man.
Donna Summer made one statement about AIDS, and she only had like a couple of top 10 hits after that. She was every damn where in 1980. I mean, she had all of these hits, and she said one thing, and they destroyed her.
They destroyed that woman. They did a number on her, man.
Top 10. Love is in Control is her hit. And this time I know it's for real. For the rest of her career, I think she just had 3 top 10 records from about 1981 until she died in 2000, 11, 12. Well, she died shortly after, a couple years after 9/11. She didn't have hits for just 3. I mean, y'all need to understand, look Donna Summer up. She was hot as hell. A lot of artists, just blacks, were not able to make it. And Michael Jackson, who felt snubbed by the Grammys, dropped this album. Like I said, the first time I heard it, I said, this is great. And particularly the Billie Jean. So the Billie Jean, I know Beat It's, that's oriented to getting the album-oriented rock, these metal-loving white kids to listen to him. And I thought that the Wanna Be Starting Something would have done better, but it's too dance. That frightened people. And so it only got to the top. But the album was good. It led off with a safe song that I never bought as a single record. In fact, when I was texting Brother Dwan the other night, I thought I had made an error, but I was right. I never bought the single "The Girl Is Mine." I think it's psychotic, a black man and a white man fighting over the same woman. That's a stupid ass man. That's sort of on the Kanye West level to fight with the white man.
I don't believe it. No,
oh my God! But you know what?
Yeah.
What was Michael and them trying to do? They were trying to get the same effect that Ebony and Ivory had done for Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder. That was the biggest song of 1981.
After loving me, she said she couldn't love another. Come on now, Michael. It's not. Look, Dr. Short. Let's just get
keep
real.
dreaming.
If it's a woman, I don't care.
Keep dreaming. Keep dreaming.
I don't believe it. I don't care if the woman is. I don't care if it's the goddamn Queen of England. If it's a woman on Earth that got breath, and she got pre-bleached skin Michael Jackson or Paul McCartney, it's not a competition. And so that whole song was like it was almost like what am I listening to
he was slumming. Michael Jackson was slumming the same way Stevie Wonder was slumming. Basically, white radio won't play us as who we are. So we need to partner with someone white. We have to do a people of color record to get heard.
That was a big thing. Then they did on Paul McCartney's album. They did say, right?
Yes, they did. They did. So he in turn did a people of color record for him. So it's basically blacks weren't getting played. That's why I'm saying to you, black folks that were getting #1 records were singing ballads that were soft, Endless Love, Baby Come to Me, Truly. I mean, it had to be something soft. Now, you niggas, you ain't gonna get up on stand. You ain't gonna do no more disco. Disco's finished. You can croon, but you can't,
It's funny you say that because I was talking about Mr. Carmichael about Brick House. Brick House is one of my favorite songs that he put together.
Right.
And his personal favorite music to do is funk. Funk is what he liked the most. He comes out of gospel, but he was like, yeah, funk was cool, but Brick House was cool, but truly and all night long and the crossover stuff, that's what brings in the money.
Exactly.
It was a move that is like, okay, yeah, this music might be a little cheesier, it might be a little bit, but hey, that's the only way you're gonna
No,
get paid. They weren't paying him.
we like the good music because you got the people who can't sing. Now, I mean,
Well, good point.
Sheena Easton's probably the only white girl that came out new that could sing in the early '80s, and she only had like 2 or 3 hits. You didn't? No, she had one with Kenny Rogers. She had Sugar Walls, 9 to 5, and some other stuff. But look,
And just a quick commercial for y'all. When we talk about white women that can't sing, we don't put Tina Marie in that category. Tina Marie was something different. She was an anomaly. So when we talk about white women, Tina Marie ain't part of that category.
I'm thinking. So Michael Jackson drops this album. And one of the first things that happened is the head of CBS, Yatintikov, I may saying his name wrong, but it starts with a Y, he's Jewish, threatened MTV because when Michael Jackson was beginning to make traction with Billie Jean, MTV didn't want to they refused to put it on on rotation at all. And it's like a courtesy. The record companies, everybody helped each other. They're basically saying to the biggest record company in the world, we're not going to play your black artist. Okay, now, in fact, I've got to say something. I disliked The Girl of His Mind so much, I've never listened to it in and of itself in all the years that it's been out. In fact, I bought Billie Jean as a single, even though I had the album Thriller and I had the audio cassette. And that's why when I wrote you the other night, Dwan, I did not know because I had never seen a physical single of The Girl of His Mind because I had no intentions of buying it. So I did not know that the song Can't Get Out of the Rain was on the B-side of The Girl of His Mind as well as the B-side of Billie Jean. Remember I wrote you the other night that when I read up and I said, oh my God, that's the B-side. Maybe I was wrong. But I said I had 2 or 3 copies, right? So, by the way, there's a very good song that's a remake or a jazzed up version of something that Michael Jackson had done with Quincy Jones from the Wiz album. And that was the B-side to Billie Jean. Do, 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 do. Get out of the rain. It had nice horns. Dun, 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 dun. Do, do,
Arranged by Tom Washington.
Yes, a Tom Tom Club. So Billie Jean comes out, y'all, and I just want to tell you again, that was my senior year in high school. I partied a lot then. I had these black boots. I had a black cape. I had white gloves and I had a black hat. And we used to go and we would spin around like Michael Jackson, man. We would party. It's really nice if you hold your cape and you look like Zorro and shit spinning. But Billie Jean was a cut, man, and it was a hit, and the thing zoomed.
And on a technical aspect of Billie Jean, when we talk about why Thriller was so big, why it was such a great album, you gotta look at the personnel that was also on the album. You can't
Yes,
just put a beat together and get that. The bass line, that was Louis Johnson from the Brothers Johnson playing the
yes,
bass. That was Thunder
mhm.
Thumbs. You had when you're talking about that, when you're talking about there was that Joe Sample that was Greg Games on one of the keys, Joe Sample playing one of the other keys. You're talking about the top of the top of the top musicians. You're talking about um, this is the ingredients in the stew that made that album. That album had George Duke playing some session music. That album had James Ingram singing background and doing some writing. This album has literally the best. You have Tom arranging the horn section for Quincy Jones. This is the same Tom that used to arrange horns for Earth, Wind, and Fire.
And you know what? And Paul Reiser. They had all
And Paul,
kinds of people doing the
you you
strings.
you had Wah Wah Watson on guitar. Yes, Paul Reiser. Paul Reiser, he did the string arrangements.
Yeah, he did. And you know what? We need to mention that there's a group out called the Wrecking Crew. These are some of the best studio musicians in the world are called the Wrecking Crew. They're out of Los Angeles.
Right.
And next to the Motown Funk Brothers, the Wrecking Crew, they're just monsters. I
Yeah.
mean, all of your hits, Beach Boys, Sonny and shit, you name it. You go to the Wrecking Crew, these are the people that get the stuff done. So, Michael releases The Girl Is Mine. It gets to number 2. Thank God it was. Phew. I never thought that was going to be a number 1 record. It made it to number 2, if I'm correct. And then Billie Jean was immediately released. And what happened as Billie Jean began to just turn people out, I repeat, the president of CBS told MTV, if you guys don't play Michael, we're pulling all of our shit off of your station. You won't ever get anything from CBS if you screw Michael like this. And once they played that video, I remember the first time I saw it, I was standing upstairs in the same house, and the video was awesome. And Billie Jean is Michael Jackson's best-selling single in his career. That thing rocked. In fact,
Billy,
Steely Dan and them did something called Slingshot, Do It Again. There are all kinds of people who got on that riff. Even the little tethered Billy Ocean, the Caribbean copier, had Caribbean Queen. Da, 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 da. He couldn't sing that one for me. He had the bass line from Billie Jean for Caribbean Queen.
you know
Several
that song was
people.
supposed to be my European Queen. But they made them change it because they
Mm.
said the song was supposed to be European Queen. And
Well, he wanted to sing European Queen. Over that thing that died a couple of weeks back. Look, let me just say this.
hey, and also like I want to say the other thing about Billie Jean. Michael Jackson also had a variety within one album. Like nowadays, you have they make it seem as if a song or an artist has to stick to one genre. There are multiple genres on this album, just like it was typical of a Michael Jackson or a Stevie Wonder album at that time to jump around. Billie Jean was funk, straight up 1-2. That's straight up the 1-2 funk. And just like The Girl Is Mine was more crossover, and then when you get to Thriller, that's more rock. You see the diverse palette Michael Jackson had with his music, and it's about as funky as you can get with that song, Billie Jean. Go ahead, Dr. Short.
Yeah. So, one of the other things, it wasn't just what Michael Jackson did for himself. You need to understand that once Billie Jean hit, and Michael Jackson came out, he topped the charts in March of 1983. I think it went to March, first week of March. Let me check. I know I'm right. When you start seeing that, you're amazed at all the other artists who had been held back. A lot of artists began to get hit. Michael Jackson, of course, had Billie Jean. Irene Cara had a song, What a Feeling, Flashdance, What a Feeling. Lionel Richie had a #1 record. Patty Austin and James Ingram had a record that was out.
And that was produced by Quincy Jones also.
Yeah, the Quincy Jones' shop. And by the way, Thriller carried over into 84. So Thriller was the best-selling album in the United States for 2 consecutive years. It's never happened for anybody's album. And just understand that Prince had big hits the following year in 84. Culture Club is a mixed band. I'm going to give it to him. Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbuster. Tina Turner, What's Love Got to Do with It? Stevie Wonder has a #1 hit that year. Of course, Michael had his hit. Lionel Richie has a hit. Denise Williams has a hit. right? And of course, you've got imitators like Hall and Oates, which is Blue Eyed Soul, Madonna, Blue Eyed Soul, Wham, Blue Eyed Soul. Once Michael Jackson and then broke out, it actually desegregated MTV and the music airplay across the world. Yeah, I need to understand it. That's how huge it was. And people need to understand, people will scream that Adele sold 300,000 records or 100,000 records in a week. Michael Jackson was selling 1.5 million albums in a week. That's absolutely insane.
When you have to drive to the record store.
I mean, people were buying. Michael Jackson caught on fire in '84 when they were doing the Pepsi commercial. When Michael Jackson got sick, I think they sold 1 million albums that week off of Michael Jackson getting sick. Thriller was a #1 album for 37 non-consecutive weeks. It's almost the better part of a year.
And it was taken out by Atomic Dog.
No, but that you're talking about the single. The album, I don't think the album came down. I think that Billboard, they didn't like seeing a black album being that big that long. But over and over again, the Michael Jackson Thriller, so it was massive, and it was big everywhere. And I going back, digressing, I got to spend about four months of my high school career in Australia, which is basically Michael Jackson's country. I remember how crazy they were over Michael Jackson and Off the Wall. So I'm thinking about being in an ice skating rink and they played the Michael Jackson to death. And racist Australia, that's all they were playing in the ice skating rink. I'll never forget ice skating, and all they're playing is Michael Jackson over and over and over again. All the kids in school had Michael Jackson records. I mean, girls come and tell you they wish they could get impregnated by Michael Jackson, at least one of his brothers. Anybody, someone come here, send them here to screw us. I mean, it's, oh my God. That's how powerful black music is. To get off the airport at Sydney International Airport, and these white men they thought my mother was in the fifth dimension. Either they thought she was Florence LaRue because we came on the same plane, and have to fight people off because you're black. They assume you're some kind of celebrity or entertainer, and they're trying to force you in a limo. It actually wasn't sex trafficking. They were just showing respect. Like, okay, you're black, you're important. Please get in the limo. Oh, wow. So, Michael, I mean, these people were big. Thriller's the best-selling album, I think, in British history. And people need to take the time to understand that there's nothing like it. They can tell you that the Eagles sold more records in America than Michael Jackson, but I need to remind people there was something else going on when Thriller came out that you haven't mentioned, Brother Dwan, and that is now they had these boxes where you could record straight off the radio onto audio tapes, anything that was being played. So an audio tape may be cost you, depending on how you paid for it, maybe 60 cents. Depending on if you bought in bulk, you could get an audio tape for about 40 cents. You could record an entire album if they played it on the radio and not have to buy it. So if you understand it, there are people who actually, whereas you young folk and other people copy stuff now and rip off stuff now, you could do that then, just you had something physical that you had to do it with. You still were in the analog system.
I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Short, because that's something I used to do back in the 80s. And
yeah,
it was
but
typical,
people bought Michael, even though they could copy it and get it for free off the radio, you wanted one. So I had copies of Thriller on tapes, but you still had the album because I'll be honest with you, even to this day, there are a lot of people who are audiophiles. Music sounds better. It sounds better when you listen to it on vinyl than when you listen to it on tape. People that know that, people bought the vinyl. And they
And
even had it was so popular, Thriller. They even had a $40 edition of a Slow Master Thriller. Did you ever see that, Dwan?
no, I did not see that.
You have a Slow Master one, $40. I guess that'd be like $120 album today. If you wanted a Slow Master, really the ultimate mix of Thriller, if you had $40, $50, you could get one. People were buying it at the high end
Doc, doc,
stores.
Dr. Short, I want you to keep going, but I got another guest in here. I want her to speak because
Mhm.
Nicole's view. She's someone who has been. I love her. I appreciate her. She's when it comes to. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, Dr. Short, but she was the one when the whole Bill Cosby thing was going down. She held
Mhm.
it down with the truth.
Yeah,
This whole Michael
I've heard of
Jackson.
her, and
Yeah,
I think
with this.
she knows that Bill Cosby's my cousin.
Yeah,
Um,
and Michael Jackson, the whole thing with this Michael Jackson, I would depend on her Twitter when when the whole thing with leaving Neverland, whatever was going on. Her Twitter was where you went to go find the truth from all the lies that they've been putting out about Michael Jackson. She's been a straight up warrior for Michael and for telling the truth and putting the story out there accurately. So I want to hear Nicole's point of view uh, when it comes to Michael and when it comes to the Thriller album. And I want to hear what you have to say, Nicole. Anything you got to say about Michael, something. I just want to hear you speak.
Hey y'all, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, we
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you, DwannB, for inviting me. I know it's been a minute since I've done one of these, so it's pretty crazy. And secondly, Dr. Randy Short, we gotta hook up. I haven't really been on YouTube lately, but I'm gonna get back on. You are a walking history book, and I think that is amazing. Most of what you've said is on point. I've been a fan of Michael, the family, since I was like 7 years old. So, but Dr. Randy Short, you got me on some years. I was born in '84. So, of course, for me, we didn't get to experience, Thriller, Off the Wall, and all that.
on
But
the Ed Sullivan Show. Thank you so very much. I appreciate you. You're so beautiful.
oh, too funny, too funny. But yeah, we didn't. So for us 80s babies, we didn't get to experience that. So for me, when I was like, I think when Dangerous came out in '91, I became infatuated with Michael Jackson. So once that moment happened, then I started going backwards. I'm like, oh, this is the bad album. Oh, this is Thriller. Oh, so you just start to rediscover him for us. So for me, when I saw Thriller and you see these clips of just how massive this album was and how it just took over the world, and we will never see anything like this again. And to see how it initially started, from what I've heard, when they first recorded it, they played it back and they said it was garbage. So they had to do it all over again. So you hear this stuff and just knowing what they went through and how Dr. Randy Short talked about how Michael wanted to take over the world with Thriller and how Off the Wall just basically it was great, but it wasn't Grammy winning what he wanted. And he told himself, I'm going to sell the biggest selling album. I believe his brother Jackie said that he had wrote on the mirror, I'm going to have the biggest selling album of all time. And you hear that kind of stuff, and it's inspirational because you can achieve it pushes you to want to do better in whatever you do. So I just love him for that, just for the fact that he pushed himself to create one of the biggest albums of all time. And currently I want to say, before I have to get off of here, the fans right now are pushing for us to stream Thriller the single, because Thriller the single never reached number one on the Hot Billboard chart. So they're asking everyone between October 28th, which is Friday, to November 3rd, for us to stream Thriller the song, buy the single on Apple, whatever musical app you use, because we're going to try to push it to number one. They're asking people to call into radio stations to request it, and just let's make history again with this album. I think it would send shockwaves and just really prove that, y'all really tried to bring this man down with lies, with everything. And here he is still rising. And I think it's a great idea. So y'all make sure to stream Thriller, the single, starting Friday to November 3rd. spread the word. We want to get it up to number one on the Hot Billboard chart. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I know you're busy, so I'm glad. Thank you for coming up and speaking.
No problem.
Before Dr. Short get back to speaking, Eve, Nikki, did you two have something to say that you want to say right in the meantime before we get back to Dr. Short?
No, Dr. Short can go or Eve can go. Go ahead.
Okay.
Y'all follow Nicole's View. Y'all follow Nicole's View YouTube channel is viral, and I can't wait to see you back up there, Nicole. Please. So resetting the room to everybody in here. We're talking about celebrating Thriller 40. We spent the last hour, really hour and a half, really setting the foundation because you know what they do when they talk about our music. Somebody got a putt. My neighbor across the street, they driving. They driving a 1983 Datsun. God damn. But anyway, so we over here, we celebrating the Thriller 40. We're setting the foundation because we know in the dominant society, whenever they talk about our music, they always want to cut. They'll give it some credit and they'll give it a little backdoor jab at the same time. So we're bringing into full context from our point of view. Dr. Short, someone who was there. Me personally, I was born in 1981, and I'm a child. I was a child of Thriller, and remember as a 7. I remember Thriller and Michael Jackson always being a part of my life. And even as I got into the 80s and the 90s when Bad came out, Michael Jackson was always there. And you see it right now with children. You get a 4 and 5. I had a friend of mine who had to break the news to their 6-year-old that Michael Jackson was dead. Like, it was dead long before he even was born. That's the effect Michael Jackson had on the world. So we're here to bring a true context, a true understanding of the environment around the album, and then the album itself and the aftermath. And with that, we have, for those of you listening later on YouTube, we got Dr. Randy Short here. Thank y'all. Jesse, I see you got your hand up. You say what you got to say, then I'm going to get right back to Dr. Short.
Thank you. Just real quick, because you guys have been talking about pre-Eve existence. Like, I mean, Nicole just talked about 91, so I was here, I was a baby still. But my daughter, who's 10, when she first heard Michael, she calls him Michael. It was the most amazing, incredible thing. Like, she was just in love, and she would swoon. It, not like, anything inappropriate, but just she resonates with the music. She knows his story, and I just think that that's incredible that our energy can move through generations like that.
Because Michael, what he did, or look like Dr. Short got kicked out. We'll see if he come back. What it is with music, is an emotion. And Michael Jackson knew how to put his passion into everything that he did. Every note that Michael Jackson sang, every dance move that he made, he emoted it. And that's what it comes down to. And Michael Jackson was very sensitive. He felt everything. And he knew how to transfer that feeling from his environment and dump it into the music. So what we're getting is his energy. Not only is he a great singer, not only is he a great dancer, but the biggest thing you're getting from him is that feeling, that emotion. And then when you combine that with an all-star cast, because in order to understand Quincy Jones, you gotta understand Count Basie. I know I might be going back too far for y'all, but anybody who know me know musically, I love Count Basie. Count Basie to me is that's music God right there. And Quincy Jones comes through that Count Basie camp. Count Basie, he's how he's one that made Ella Fitzgerald worldwide, Billie Holiday worldwide, Lester Young. You're great. Count Basie was Dr. Dre, the Dr. Dre of his time. You know how like back in the 90s and the 2000s, if you wanted to hit, you had to go to Dre. That's how Count Basie was. When Frank Sinatra's career fell off, he needed a hit. He had to go to Basie. When the man he's passed, the other he's 96 years, Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett needed a hit. Go to Count Basie. Count Basie. That's the camp that Quincy Jones worked with Ray Charles. You know, he worked with the greatest of the greatest of the greatest. And this is 20 years before he got to Michael Jackson. This is 30 years before he got to Michael Jackson. And so he's getting this bassy experience. He's getting Nat King Cole. He's getting Ray Charles. He's getting all of these elements that Quincy Jones worked with leading up into the Thriller album. And all of that is going into the stew. You have Greg Gaines. Greg Gaines is the most recorded artist of all time. He's coming up. He's playing the keyboard. You got Louis Thunder Thumbs Johnson, Tom. I mean, you literally have on every single instrument. You have Bruce Sweden as a sound engineer. Every element, you're Paul Reiser arranging strings. That's the same Paul Reiser string arrangements for those Luther Vandross hits. Those are Paul Reiser string arrangements. Paul Reiser, when it comes, I was talking to my father-in-law about Reiser yesterday. You talk about if you ask me right now who had the better string arrangement, Paul Reiser or Beethoven, I'm taking Paul Reiser 5 times over Mozart, over Beethoven, over Johann Sebastian Bach. That's who Paul Reiser is. And this is the person writing those violin arrangements underneath the music.
Hey, Dwan, we need to give them some examples of it. The violins for Don't Stop Till You Get Enough is Paul Reiser. The violins for My Girl is Paul Reiser. The violins for What's Going On is Paul Reiser.
Didn't you know that by Luther Vandross?
The violins for I Hear a Symphony. The violins for I Wish It Would Rain. I mean,
Portuguese Love by Tina Marie.
Yeah, when you start, I mean, you have the best arranger. I haven't been able to get him on the phone, but for my Motown uncle, he's his cousin. When you think about some of the best stuff, what's that song, Statue of a Fool? When you start hearing this incredibly good music, this is Paul Reiser. And Paul Reiser is still alive and still active. And when Dwan said that people stop getting work, Paul Reiser is one of those people that doesn't get asked to do stuff much anymore with all this ability. And it's not just him. I think Barrett Strong, the guy who wrote I Heard It Through the Grapevine, they live in the same building in Detroit, and nobody asked them anything. It's interesting how Elton John and Betty White, and I have to put some of this on black folks, we're very trashy. We're very disposable. We throw people away if they're not like, we used to not be like that. Now we put our grandparents and people and assisted living and all this stuff where they can get killed. We're letting folks, I had someone whose mom just got killed this past week, fake COVID. We throw our older people away. We don't see what we can work with them on. It's sad. And so all these great artists, right. It's sad. We're sad. Damn, we're sad.
We look at Paul Reiser. We looking at Gene Page, Leon Ware, James Carmichael. We as black people don't Norman Whitfield. We don't know that these people are made pieces of art, arrangements, grander than these symphony orchestras and these people that these Europeans brag about.
And let's just stop.
They're still alive.
And let me give you guys an example. All of these symphony orchestras all over the world are broke. They're subsidized. The operas, they literally bring in Motown and other stuff to get people to spend money. It's called the pops. When these folks are proud of whiteness, but not necessarily interested in the cultural production of the culture they're supposedly so proud of, right? They have to bring in other stuff. So I can just say to you, I was in Jackson, Tennessee. In order to get people to be interested in the local orchestra, they do Motown Under the Stars. That's the only thing to get their own Aryan brothers and sisters to take them seriously is an orchestrated version of the black music that they like to hear. How about that, y'all? How about that?
And orchestra is so important to our mental health. When you're talking about orchestra string arrangements, what happens when you fall in love with someone? They pull on your heartstrings. The string arrangements is what sways your emotion within a song. When you listen to a song, I'll give you an example. When you listen to Michael, we're keeping it on Thriller 40. We're talking about Michael Jackson. When you listen to to Don't Stop Till You Get Enough on the Off the Wall album, when if you listen to underneath, when the song is churning and moving, underneath you hear that Paul Reiser, that string arrangement. Those strings are tugging your heart and swaying your emotion, they're swirling your emotion, they're getting you to connect. And that was replaced by a keyboard. Now the keyboard sounds good, and Stevie Wonder brought that in with Village Ghetto Land. That was the first string arrangement ever recorded by a keyboard, Village Ghetto Land, on the Songs of the Kid Life album, 1976. But Stevie went back to the strings after that. When you get to about 84, when we talk about, Dr. Shore was talking about earlier, when it came to budget, when they stopped paying for these string arrangements and now it's replaced by a simple keyboard sound, it still sounds good. And especially if you grew up on it, it's going to feel good because that was your era. But those string arrangements, like Eve was just saying, her 10-year-old, when you get that real life emotion played by real humans, the music transcends time. And you're
And
always going to feel it.
can I interject something?
Go ahead. And then we'll get to Ruben, but go ahead.
Music through synthesizers is naturally sharp. Acoustic music is naturally smooth and natural. Okay, it's neither flat nor sharp. A lot of why people are stressed out is they listen to music that is non-melodic, it's sharp, it actually makes you moody and mean. We're not even aware of that. There's a smoothness to an acoustic instrument, like a cappella music has certain elements that you don't have to, have a whole lot of stuff to sound and feel good. So literally, they've made music that is less pleasing to the ear by, in fact, getting rid of paying artists who can actually drum. Do people realize that when you listen to a mechanical drum, the beat isn't as good as if you have a really good percussionist like Benny Benjamin or Pistol Allen or Tito
DwannBrown.
Puente? Yes, you get what I'm saying, Dwan. That when people had the drum machines, the white folk brought in the drum machines to punish black drummers who were quintessential for you to have hits if you really wanted to have a hit. They basically, it's like the song they sing about John Henry, and they had the steam engine that could outdo John Henry because he was a man. There's always been an effort to replace us. And in fact, it's interesting, even when the black people in the early 80s went over to doing all this mechanical stuff, let's talk about who did it real fast. EMI Capital. What's her name? She's from Newark. Melba Moore and all these other people at Capitol, Kashif, all of them were making all of this mechanical soul music. It sounded good. Freddie Jackson, all of it sounds the same. They didn't have the live musicians. They had all this synthesizer stuff. Even when they went over and made the stuff, they didn't get the play. EMI Capital got screwed. The black artists that were making really good stuff didn't get the same attention. There's a distinctiveness to acoustic music, real drums, real saxophones. Village Ghetto Land would have been a hit with real strings. It sounds creepy with the organ. I'm sorry, Stevie Wonder.
Like funeral music, and I love
yes, I love it. I mean, he ruined that song doing that. You could tell him I said it. It should have had real strings. It would have been more beautiful and uplifting. It's grating on the ears to hear the original recording.
And Dr. Shaw, I want to add one more part to what you just said about the drums. Again, another story. I was talking to Mr. Carmichael one day about the drums itself. He said he heard from other music producers at other labels. One producer basically was threatened. If you bring that drummer in here, something can happen to you. It was a planned thing. You know why? Because the drums are the heartbeat. The drums with the feel. That's the groove. The whole, we're talking about Thriller, when you listen to Michael Jackson's music, when you listen to that swing on Billie Jean, that 1-2, I don't care how, if you take quantize off, you can't get that 1-2 swing program. when it comes to the different songs on that album, when it comes to Lady of My Life, that feeling, that groove, there's a texture to that song that's played by the drummer. And it's a texture when we play. There's a certain swing, a certain feel, a certain pocket that cannot be emulated or duplicated on some damn machine. And they took that from us because that texture is what sets the environment. The drums are like the roof. For those of you who cook gumbo in here, the roof, the drums and the bass, that right there is going to set the flavor for your gumbo. If the drums and bass ain't right, the flavor ain't going to be right. And the texture and the flavor in which the drums and bass plays determines the outcome and the texture of the music. Before I want to get to my man Ruben, because I know Ruben, I know how much you love Michael Jackson. Michael Ruben, that's Jesus to Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is Jesus to Ruben.
Well, he needs to give me some ties. I need some money.
Ruben, what you got to say about Michael Jackson, brother?
Oh yeah, man, you already know. All praises to the Most High, the Almighty Moonwalker, my Lord and Savior Michael Jackson. But I just wanted to peep. You guys were talking about the drummers, and an interesting fact is I want to say that this dude did drums on Off the Wall. I'm not 100% sure. I have to rewatch the Off the Wall documentary. But he said he actually became a drummer because on the Shake Your Body to the Ground by the Jacksons, the drums on that track was actually layered because it was such a complex pattern. So it had like different layers. They just recorded the drummer just doing each part. But the guy they ended up getting for like the band to actually perform with them live, they were surprised that he actually was able to play the whole pattern live. And they were like, "How did you do that?" Because we had to do it layered. So that's how he got the job.
Sugarfoot Mafia.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yeah. So,
you got the little thin ponytail.
Yeah. And then also I just wanted to say this too. You were talking about Quincy Jones earlier, and it's just dope to speak to like his wisdom and talent and all that he did because like you said, he was known for being a jazz person, but when he started working with Michael, when Mike first told Epic Records, he said, "I want Quincy Jones to do my solo album." And the execs laughed at him. They was like, "Why do you want a jazz dude to make your soul R&B record? That doesn't make any sense." And so they actually kind of laughed it off. But Mike stood firm and said, "No, this is who I want to make the album." And it just goes to show just the genius of Michael because, if you didn't get the Off the Wall album, we would never get Thriller, which became the biggest selling album of all time. But it just, but it just goes to show, like, if you have the vision and you know what you want for yourself, you know what I'm saying, you can make it happen. And that's why MJ to me is the GOAT, and he inspires me every day. And with that, I'll land my point.
On top of that, Ruben, to go along with what you just said, is not only did he stand 10 toes down for Michael Jackson because they didn't want they didn't want Quincy Jones. Oh, could you mute yourself? It's coming back. Yeah. So not only did he do that and stand 10 toes down for Quincy Jones to become his producer, they actually wanted Maurice White to produce the album. And mind, this is when Maurice White was at his hottest. Earth, Wind & Fire had just had 5 straight #1 albums. At the time, they're coming, the All in All album, That's the Way the World was 75, Spirit was 76, All in All was 77. All in All was an album with Fantasy on it. And then there was I Am that came out in 78. And then at the same time, Maurice White had just produced #1 hits for The Emotions, #1 hits for Denise Williams. And so that's who they wanted to produce his album.
But you know what, Dewan? But Maurice White had Stepney, the guy that died, one of their key people. So they weren't quite the same after that cat died.
I don't want. Remember, because Stepney died in the middle of the Spirit album in '76. Fantasy, that album with Fantasy, Be Ever Wonderful, that was after they still had 2 more #1 albums after Stepney died. Mm-hmm. And so all I'm saying is Maurice White was at his zenith at this point. And so for Michael Jackson to stand at a time of what's going on in the record industry, for him to stand 10 toes down against a guy who's at his absolute best right now and take a chance on Quincy Jones, because we know as black folks, we jump around when it comes to music. All of it's our music. The juke joint guys, the guys who created jazz also created stand-up comedy, also created the blues. It's the same musicians, but the white executives, they dumb. They don't understand this shit. They
They
don't
don't
understand
have
that.
to. That's white privilege.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah. They
white.
don't
I'm
have to understand.
stupid. I'm empowered. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
That's
So Michael
basically the
Jackson,
attitude.
yeah. So Michael Jackson went 10 toes down, and he made that move, and he did what he had to do. So that again goes to show you the discipline of Michael Jackson, how strong he was, how strong-willed he was, and we can learn a lot about that from Michael Jackson. He
Mhm.
wasn't the Michael Jackson he was before the Thriller album wasn't the Michael Jackson he was after. I mean, meaning in the perception of the dominant society. These were risks that he took, and these are risks that paid off. I'm gonna get this other speaker real quick. Different, make it real quick, then because I want to get back to Dr. Short. Go ahead, brother.
The only thing I wanted to say was, when it comes to Michael Jackson, when I was little, his Thriller video scared me when I was a kid. When he started to turn into the werewolf, I used to run from it and shit, and it scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. So that's all I wanted to say. Is like the video scared the fuck out of me. Big fan, but I
It
don't know. That's
it,
what I
it,
wanted to say.
it scared me too. I remember when when I was a kid, my dad took us up to Encino to the house on Havenhurst, and I remember I was like 3 or 4. I was really young, and I was like, oh hell no, nah, pops, man, that Thriller nigga gonna come out because if you ever been by there, the Havenhurst house is behind a whole bunch of tall ass grass trees and shit. I thought Thriller was gonna come out. I was like, hell no, nah, pops, get me out of here. but Dr. Short, go ahead, Miss
Mhm.
Dr. Short. I know we've
You know
taken a
what?
little time. I want you to get back to going what you got to say. Go ahead,
Well,
brother.
Stacey Abrams is big enough to be all of the monsters in Thriller by herself. Can you imagine Michael dancing in front of Stacey? Did you see her doing the Stud King Shuffle? No, that was making me laugh. I mean, she, 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 she danced like some of the thugs in my neighborhood. But look, I want to say this about Quincy Jones. People seem to forget that Quincy Jones in 1963 was asked to produce popular music for what's this company? Not MCA, but for help me, God, what's her label? I want it's not MCA Decca. It'll come to me. Mercury. And they took the white Jewish teenage girl, Leslie Gore, and ran a couple million selling records on her in no time. It's My Party and so forth. I mean, so Quincy Jones took an unknown white girl and made her an international phenomenon. I mean, with a multi-million
and
selling
his
record.
and his work with Ray Charles. I
Yes, but
mean, yeah,
this is after Ray
yeah,
Charles,
after Ray,
just to show that he could go into the pop music business and replicate what he was doing with greats. He could get an unknown and do the same thing. So he got Leslie Gore, and we need to remember what's happening at the same time that Michael Jackson has Thriller out is you've got the album to the film Fame. Baby, look at me and tell me what you see. Right? Remember that song?
Yep.
Okay, well, I think Leslie Gore, the same woman that had been developed by Quincy Jones and Mercury Records, she and her brother Michael Gore wrote much of the music for that film, Fame. There's no way Michael Jackson wasn't familiar with Fame. It was on television. It was everywhere. So you have to think about the fact that Fame was quite a phenomenon. It was on television, all of it. Those of you that are young, real young, wouldn't remember it, but Fame was huge. And Out Here on My Own, and these other things are done by the Gores. Michael would be aware of this. This is one of Quincy's proteges coming from out of nowhere. People had written Leslie Gore off for what she had, sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, and so hadn't had a hit in years. They went from being a performer that sang what the producers told her to writing and producing a really good soundtrack. So that could have been an influencing thing because those are the kinds of people that he would have run into in New York because this stuff is happening around the time that The Wiz is done. And we need to remember that Jones had worked with Michael again with Diana Ross for The Wiz. It had bombed. The music was good, just black folks weren't interested. And frankly, to this day, I don't know if The Wiz has ever made the money that was put into it, even all, like 40 plus years later. I wish that the same thing would happen to the Stud King and Stud Conda, but wishful thinking. The other thing
they ended up making it because they said later, like as time went on and all the replays, it ended up becoming a money maker for them. But it took years.
It took years for it to make money.
Decades.
The other thing that Michael Jackson became an enemy to the music business off of the proceeds of Thriller because he bought the catalog that belonged to the Beatles and everybody else. And Michael Jackson literally had $1 billion worth of intellectual property within a year or so of Thriller being released. And so the triumph of Thriller wasn't just that he's selling all these records and performing, but as a businessman, he outbidded, and John Lennon had been shot dead in 1981. The other two Beatles are broken. No one remembers them except for burnt out white folks from the 60s. And Paul McCartney is the only one, who probably has anything left. And Michael was willing to pay more money for it. Then shows you how cheap British people lost. And so Michael got everybody's music, and it needs to be said that Michael, I think, gave Sly Stone his music back. He gave Little Richard his music back. And I think he did it for some other people. Michael Jackson actually paid reparations to the people that had influenced him.
And at the time, these were multi-million-dollar catalogs. I think Chuck Berry's catalog was part of that too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but the catalog for the Beatles, it's worth billions of dollars.
I'm talking about the ones that he gave back. What he gave back.
Yes.
I mean, because what happened, and this is what happened after that happened. I don't know if you remember, Dr. Short, that Michael Jackson gave Little Richard his catalog back worth millions of dollars. And then right after that, Little Richard got a contract with Taco Bell. Taco Bell is big now, but Taco Bell was a fledgling new franchise. What made Taco Bell take off was an ad campaign they had in the late 80s and through the early 90s with Little Richard and him doing all this screen. That's what really got Taco Bell popping nationwide, was those Little Richard songs. And Michael Jackson had just given him the catalog back in time for him to reap the benefits of his music getting put into those Taco Bell commercials.
I wish he could do some commercials for them to close the border.
Do you think any commercial good enough for them to close the gap between Stacey Abrams' teeth?
Well, the gap between her and the table, I heard she sits upon it. I bet her boobs rest on the table when she's putting her face in the plate. By the way, I have a joke for y'all. What's the one skin condition that will make Stacey Abrams not want to be with a woman? Don't you answer, Dwan. Baby bumps.
It's funny. We were talking about Paul Reiser earlier. I thought about Stacey Abrams when we talk about Luther Vandross. She looks like Big Luther.
Well, she's more of a man than him. Are you man enough? Big and bad enough? Does Carmichael know? Does he know Pate, the guy who did the arrangements for that?
Yes,
I think Paul Reiser did the strings for that. But anyway, these people are just great. Now let's go back to Michael.
We literally, just to reset the room, people who are new here, we're talking about Michael Jackson Thriller 40. I know you hear us talking about other stuff, but we're really getting the environment around Thriller in the music industry. We're giving you a full 360-degree story about the environment surrounding Thriller and the music of the time. Later on this week, I will be doing an Incense and Ashtrays. Well, it might be, I think, on Sunday night. I'm doing Incense and Ashtrays where we're going to play the full Thriller album, every song on it. I'm going to explain a lot of the history behind the music. We're going to get in the groove. We're going to play it live on Mixcloud. And we're going to talk some history. We're going to talk some stories around the music. I'm also later on this week or next week, I haven't got the date down yet, but I'm interviewing Mortonette Stevens. She was the background singer on "Wanna Be Starting Something," so that was her singing "Mama Say, Mama Say, Mama Say, Do Stop." That was actually her singing that vocal lyric, and so we're going to get the real story. What was she singing when she sang that? She
And
sang
it's
that
not,
song.
and it's
What?
not Swahili. It's
It's
not
not Swahili.
Swahili.
It's not. It's not. I want to let people know that it's not Swahili, but she's going to tell you exactly what she was singing. She's going to talk to you about working behind Michael Jackson and a lot of artists and a lot of white artists. Like Dr. Short mentioned earlier, there were a lot of white artists that were floated by black sounds. Steely Dan was one of them, and there were a lot of black people. There were all mostly black musicians and black background singers behind a lot of this stuff. She was one of them. She's been in the industry since 1967, so she's going to speak. And then I'm also going to do some more stuff regarding Michael Jackson's Thriller. Going to have an article coming out pretty soon on instanceandashtrays.com. We're making this a whole celebration because Michael Jackson did it at the best. And so instead of us sitting around complaining about MTV doing some bullshit or telling half the story, we're here to tell the whole story and tell it from multiple angles and really get the story out because we're celebrating the God that got us here. One thing we haven't done good enough as a people was celebrate our gods the way we need to celebrate them. We're changing that, and we're doing that right now. I want to thank y'all for listening. I'm gonna get some more of your comments later on as we get to speaking. But Dr. Short, get back to what you were talking about. We're talking about Michael Jackson. Let's
Yeah,
keep going with the
and I
conversation.
want to talk about the impact real fast so y'all understand that that Thriller was a number one album in Australia, number three in Austria, number one in Canada, number one in Holland, number one for the European albums, number one in Finland, number one in Germany, number two in Greece, number two in Italy, number one in New Zealand, number six in Norway, number one in Sweden, number four in Switzerland, number one in the UK, number one in the United States, number one, of course, R&B. Okay, and it ranked number one album of the year in '83 for Australia, number one album of the year for Austria, number one album of the year for Canada, number one album of the year in France, number two album of the year in Germany, number six in Japan, number one in Netherlands, number two in New Zealand, number one in the UK, number one in the US, number one in the US Black charts. And in '84, number two album of the year in Australia, number three for Austria, number four for Canada, number five for Germany, number one for Japan, number four for Netherlands, number four for New Zealand, number one for Switzerland, number six for the UK, number one for the United States, and number two for the R&B charts. Are you understanding me, folks? And it was big everywhere else. The first time I had ever seen, they had a company called Cosmo. And I'm not talking about the drink. I'm talking about Cosmo is a West African company where they had Thriller for this subsidiary company for places like Sierra Leone and Liberia. Thriller was all over the world. I remember being in Seoul, South Korea in 1988. And the Korean man that drove in the taxi, he literally, and rather than getting money from us, he asked we had him play our Michael Jackson music. He asked for us to keep our money, but let him keep the Michael Jackson tape. Are y'all hearing me? It was like money for some people. I've never been in a taxi. Cabbies want their damn money. This dude wanted the tape, so I gave it to him. I was in Cuba in 2001, and I gave this guy my Michael Jackson stuff. He cried. Grown man broke down and cried. It's just music. That's how much this stuff was wanted. I gave him a Thriller and something else, and this person just cried. I was thinking I was just giving a gift of music. People have no idea. People love that Michael Jackson, and then went on to the Grammys to win 8 Grammys, including Album of the Year. And they went on the American Music Awards and won 8 of those. They had 16 highly prestigious awards. Nothing has been like it since. Nothing compares to it. And Michael Jackson had such influence until racist President Reagan was meeting with Michael Jackson at the White House to look cool.
Dr. Short, can you, because you were around, talk to us about the impact of Motown 25 and the Moonwalk?
Oh, yes. They had the anniversary, or the 25th anniversary of the founding of Motown. It was done at an auditorium in Los Angeles. I don't know the name. I don't remember the name of it. But they brought all of the Motown acts back together. Mary Wells was there. They had Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder. They had DeBarge. They had everybody there. Martha Reeves of the Vandellas. They had Richard Pryor as one of the MCs. Smokey Robinson. Of course, they had the Supremes. And they had the Jackson 5, and initially they did a medley of Jackson 5 hits. And I'll never forget him saying, "Those were the old songs. There's some new songs too." And then the beat came from Billie Jean, and he throws his hat, and Michael Jackson begins singing and doing his hip-hopping. And when he did the moonwalk, the way he did that, back then my neighborhood was all black. You could hear the neighbors screaming all up and down the street. The next one, when we got to school, people were moonwalking in the hallways. They were moonwalking on Saturday Night Live. It was a complete. In fact, it made the album sell. The album exploded. Each time that it looked like Thriller, the fever around Thriller would go down. Something would happen, and it would make Michael Jackson's album the center of attention, and the sales of the album would jump. And so that's how hot it was. I mean, everybody, I'm just telling you, when this is all for just 83, when it got to 84 and when Thriller came out, my God. But the moonwalking just about did it. Everyone was trying to do that. Everybody had the jacket, the plastic jacket Michael had. It was incredible.
Lori Lightfoot had one of those jackets on last week. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see it. And I guess it was red for Michael Jackson, but that DeRay McKesson for Black Lives Matter, he has a blue one, but it makes him look like a chimpanzee. Michael Jackson had everybody moonwalking, spinning around, dancing. And again, I want to say this to you. Y'all talk about Prince. Prince may have had more talent as an instrumentalist, but Michael Jackson created the kind of energy that allowed Prince and some other people to come out. Because Prince was not getting the kind of chart love. Prince had been hitting the charts since I Want to Be Your Lover in 79.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't really, really, really break out. He didn't break out until that Purple Rain and When Doves Cry. This stuff comes up. There's a lot of noise in your background. A lot of noise in your background.
Is noise back there? It's quiet over here. What about now? Got these AirPods on.
Okay.
Go ahead. I want to make this point about the whole Michael Jackson Prince comparison. We don't compare Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder. You have different artists that did different things. Michael Jackson was a performer, writer, singer. You do have artists out there that do play everything. If you're going to compare Prince to somebody, compare him to Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder, the Intervisions album he played, the Talking Book album he played every instrument on it. Compare him to Roger Troutman. There are artists out there who did play every instrument. That wasn't Michael's thing, playing every instrument. The biggest thing when it comes to an artist, and it shouldn't have to be. The biggest thing when it comes to an artist is how do you emote? It's the feeling. what feeling do you leave the people listening to you? What emotion do you convey? And through Michael Jackson's singing and his dancing, what he emoted, what he put out, had the biggest impact that we've ever seen musically. There, when it comes to artists, you can say there are artists who may be better writers. You can say some may be a better singer or a better musician or whatever, whatever. I don't get into those arguments. But if you're gonna compare Prince to somebody, compare him to Stevie. They're more in line with each other, what as far as what they did musically than Michael Jackson and Prince. Matter of fact,
Absolutely.
Stevie Wonder is Michael Jackson's cousin. I don't know if a lot of people know that. They're cousins. That goes to show you how great we are as black people. I mean, one family, two music guys,
And
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 then
and
throw
this is
Janet Jackson.
and it's incredible. This is what I was, talking to Kim Weston about this morning, because we were talking about music, and I was saying to her, Kim, did you know that the women in Sweet Honey in the Rock are my mother's cousins? And did you know that Jesse Norman's my mother's cousin? And I have my suspicions because the family goes all the way back 200 some odd years in Georgia. And the last name is Robinson. Well, his name is Ray Robinson, not Ray Charles. And he's from Georgia. You get where I'm coming from. This is why
Yeah,
genealogy, I'm not saying I can't claim him yet, but it's fascinating that he's got the same name, same place. You get where I'm coming from?
uh-huh.
And
And
we,
look,
we,
this family thing is deep, man. I told you, I don't know if I told you, I found out a couple years ago. Julia Roberts is my cousin. We share three grandfathers back. My
and,
great 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 grandfather is her great great grandfather's brother.
and
She
you know
black?
what? No, she's not, but it's the same way my favorite cousin, his cousin is, what's her name? Martha Stewart's great grandfather's black. Martha Stewart's not a white woman. That's why they didn't kick her ass in jail.
Yeah,
And there are a whole lot of people out here who
passing.
know the truth about what's going on. People always wonder why she didn't get beat up in jail. Well, when she told people, I have to hustle. So notice ever since she's come out of jail, Martha Stewart's always up under black people. Once the white society threw
Yeah.
her out, now, and see, this is the thing that people need to understand. A whole lot of stuff. And something I want to mention: Michael Jackson and all these other people in his family, Catherine Jackson, all of them, they're Choctaw Indians. As well as black. I mean, we need to start understanding that there's a whole and this is, I know this is going to upset the Pan Africanists, and I'm not trying to do that. I'm really not. I'm just trying to say that we have something unique to America as Black Americans, however you want to describe us. Choctaws aren't from Congo, at least not in the last 10,000 years or 20,000 years. Are you hearing me? There is a uniqueness to who and what we are. We're not like everyone else, and we shouldn't have to be. And we need to stop looking for everybody to identify or be the same as us. I'm willing to get along with everybody and anybody I can, and those that don't, that's their damn business.
But
Okay.
respect my uniqueness.
Exactly. Again, it's the same way
And
you.
I want to say one thing to go on top of that. Music is a sonic interpretation of your environment. There's a reason why we, the North American black person, has been creating genre after genre after genre of new music and creating this music and being consistent with it. It's because we have a particular communication with this landmass. This landmass walks to a different beat. It walks to a different tempo. They don't do the 4/4 like that in Africa before they. We created the drum set. The sound is different here. They do a lot of 6/8 and 7/8 time in Caribbean music. 3/4 time. The 4/4, that's something that we do. Dropping it down heavy on the one, that is something that's unique to this particular landmass. We didn't create this music trying to show the world that we're the greatest. We created this music minding our own black ass business, just trying to sound better than the church down the street. That's all we was doing. We was
That's
trying to sound
exactly.
better. We were just trying to sound better than the next band that's up. We wanted to kick the band's ass that went on before us, and we want to make sure the band after us can't. We gonna wax this stage and burn this stage down so the band after us can't perform. We wanted to make sure that First Baptist Bethany Church is kicking First Ebenezer's church ass every time we come together. We just
Mm.
minding our own black ass business doing this music. And we didn't do this shit for you guys to like it. It's cool that y'all like it, but it's the reason why our music is different. Black people occupy all four corners of this planet. They're in Australia, they're in Bali, they're in India, England, Russia, Africa, all over the place. It's the
Mm.
reason why ours sounds different. And when you get other people to come to America to play our music, it doesn't sound the same. You cannot find an African equivalent to Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, Stephanie Mills, Peabo Bryson, Luther
You can't
Vandross,
find it for
Teddy
anything.
Pendergrass.
You
It's
can't even.
just us minding our business, and it's no disrespect to anyone else. We're just at a point as the Black American now to where we're putting a foot down and we're appreciating ourselves and we're loving ourselves. And
Mhm.
that does not mean we hate you, but it does mean it's time for us to get back connected with our family. Go ahead,
And I
Dr.
want to
Short.
say something to you because I hadn't mentioned it, but I'm going to do it, for all the folks. The most significant thing that's influenced Middle Eastern music in the last 75, 80 years is an Egyptian woman named Kulthum. I know you've heard of her. And not ask your father-in-law about her. And all this music that you hear that's so cool from the Middle East, did they know that jazz influenced them? Modern Middle Eastern music that everybody's like shaking and dancing to, a lot of it is influenced by American jazz and American R&B. So even for people whose music we're not listening or dancing to, it's
This
influencing them. Let me
the
share
song
something with you.
and their song structure is directly influenced by the blues. Their
Yeah,
music structure is influenced by jazz, and the way they write their lyrics is influenced by the blues. Come on,
and and
go
and,
ahead.
and let's do something. One of the most vibrant areas of Black music in Africa is Kinshasa, right? Or Leopoldville back in the day. Now, can I tell you, and many people aren't aware, but there were Black servicemen in Leopoldville for a certain period of time in World War II, which absolutely influenced music in Congo. I'll go even further to say the man who my book is on, Slavery's Mastery, they were performing jazz to Africans in Bujimai in the 1890s and 1900s. How about that? Just this, everywhere we leave an imprint. So I talked to you about skiffle music, but Afro pop and all this stuff has a relationship. Even although there's music all over South Africa, we need to remember that folks took Black American religious music to South Africa in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And so people need to remember that you've got these missions all over Africa, and a lot of times our music goes with them. It's just a fact. So it's everywhere, and we need to remember before you even forget that there are Black Americans going to Mexico and Canada, even Black Americans going to England, following the American Revolution. Black Americans traveling all over the place. We need to remember that. We need to understand that even Black Americans going to Brazil. I'm not saying that they've had a super influence in Brazil, but there's a relationship to the music of Cuba that everybody gets so excited about, that there were Black folks from the U.S. performing jazz and the ragtime and blues in Cuba. And in other places, this is just a fact. Same thing for Panama. So when you hear about all this sauce and this, that, and the other, our influences, even in this stuff, even the folks that hate and want to replace you and not learn the same language as you, some of the music is influenced heavily by our culture,
We
by
have to
our
make sure
musicians.
we have to do one on Dizzy Gillespie to talk about just his influence alone
Oh, you mean
on a
you're
lot
talking
of
about
that stuff.
Q-Bop and how Dizzy Gillespie was sent down and the Q and even Ricky
Hmm.
Ricardo, uh, who is a white Cuban, his band was heavily Afro-Cuban.
Yeah, bossa nova. Dizzy Gillespie brought in the bossa nova sound, and the mambo mixed with bebop is bossa nova.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually going to go see Peter Escovedo tomorrow night, Sheila East Father.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
so if anybody of Latin descent that speak, I'm someone who appreciates their music. I put money up to spend. When Sergio Mendes is in town, I've seen Sergio Mendes 15 times live. I appreciate the sound, but we just want to get the story straight and give
Mm-hmm.
credit to where it comes from. That's all we coming from right here because we as the Black American, we've been told so long to take a back seat to our own sound. What do you
No,
hear
no,
when they talk about
yeah.
our music? They other it. They say, "Oh, that's black music." They always other music. They always other us and shit that we create. We
But
just
it's
here to say,
because it's like the other man. When you can't get it up, your woman has to sleep with someone else. So let's be understanding that when people mention others, because what they have doesn't stand, whether it's the Vienna sausage in their drawers or whether it's their culture. Okay, so let's be real. When they wanted to impress the Japanese, when they Commodore Perry, they performed black music, even if it was a parody. The Japanese never forgot it. That was something different. Everybody knows this, and this is just the basis. I mean, in general, of the music in the modern world is ours. I mean, outside of this, in fact, let's just talk about it. This Renaissance music and Mozart and all these other people, where'd they get the money to pay for all these orchestras? Is slavery, the slave trade, the money being made, butchering. In fact, the music that they scream and they're so proud of is basically music to make global genocide by, if you ever thought of it that way. What gave them the money to do all that and just subsidize these artists is because you're stealing and enslaving and butchering and destroying people. So you have a music where people pretend that it's the only great music in the world, and then a music that enabled people to survive hundreds of years of genocide, oppression, and dispossession and alienation. And in fact, most people would rather listen to our stuff than theirs. Think about it.
"That's true."
Back to Michael Jackson. So we can start taking questions, but just Michael Jackson took the world by storm. Clothes, everything changed around that, and a whole generation of black artists. The Minneapolis sound was able to come out. Um, Even people, Solar Records, other people, a lot of people got a break for a minute because Michael had broken the color barrier. And in fact, they had generated the kind of sales and interest in the music business where people were interested in a diversity of sounds as long as it made the cash registers ring. Now, one of the things that happened that screwed people is that you won't have another big breakout like that. Not really. The closest thing is maybe the Bodyguard and a couple of other things, but they came out with the compact disc. And the compact disc, you'll notice the technology changes each time they change the way that they market music. It tends to devastate black musicians. Black artists get hit the hardest. And you have to understand that the whites focus in on the publishing and the control. So I don't even have to make, I'm going to get paid. Basically, we are sharecropping our own cultural creativity to people who don't like us, who make all the money anyway. And so let me see, short of Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey, there are a couple of really big. I've never actually heard Drake sing, to show you how isolated I am from a lot of the new music. But I can just say to you that the great music that we have, and I'm going to just say this, and oh yes, I'm going to piss off all the secular Negroes out there. There's a strong relationship between spirituality and music quality. And I will say
Yes,
this,
sir.
and I don't care who don't like it. Our Black Islamics have given us hip hop. It just doesn't compare to soul and R&B. I'm sorry. So the people who come from spiritual traditions where the people don't sing or play that much, you can tell by the quality of the music that they make. Black music has gone down, and so has our spirituality. And what we consider religion. You have a lot of Negroes into witchcraft and stupid stuff now, and it shows in the poor quality of the music that we produce. You got a small God with a fucked up little G, then you have fucked up music. Got a great God with a capital Gothic G. Even if you don't believe it, you come up in it, you're likely to make good music. I just had someone today ask me to help their daughter in the music business, and they shared with me that they don't play, they don't read music, and they don't really sing, but they know how to make beats. It used to be white kids who couldn't play or dance or sing. And it was a mind control thing out of, what's that place in California? It's in LA. What's the damn valley where all the freaky white folks are in? Help me.
Silver
Canyon.
Valley?
No, the canyon.
Laurel
What's it?
Canyon. Laurel Canyon.
Laurel Canyon.
Oh
And that
yeah,
the CIA and all these other people picked white kids whose families were in the intelligence community to be rock stars. They couldn't sing, couldn't dance, couldn't play, like Jim Morrison. And this was done to manipulate white youth to keep them from getting concerned about civil rights or the war in Vietnam. And I would posit to you, the same forces that subverted white youth with bullshit, non-singing, non-playing, fucked up, drug-addled artists are the same people that have reduced us where someone like Gladys Knight ain't singing half a year because nobody thinks she's great, although that woman's put out hits. She can still out sing 9/10 of the people out here, and she's in her 70s, right?
I saw her live 2 years ago. Still
Yeah,
got it.
she still got it. And I had folks who've never had it. They have literally tried to kill us with our music. And there's a film that was out. It's called A Music You Can Cry In, I believe is the name of it. And it shows how the communist Chinese, the CCP, to destroy the people from Tibet, those folks can't listen or do their own music. They kill the musicians and put them in jail. You can only listen to bullshit Chinese music. The same thing is happening in America. And that's how I feel about a lot of the music now. It's music to genocide by. It represents our cultural destruction. The murder of Michael Jackson, the murder of Tupac, the murder of people who are creating innovative sounds is a way of destroying a people. Why we have to celebrate Thrillers that Michael Jackson overcame all these things to make the biggest ever. The lowest estimate is that the thing sold 70 million copies. We know it's more. We know that Michael Jackson, after Thriller, was the biggest artist in the world selling records, even though he was being screwed. In America, I happened to be in Bahia, Brazil, when Michael Jackson was there making They Don't Care About Us. And they were on full alert. They thought Michael Jackson was going to lead the people out and burn up the city and get the black people stirred up. That's real talk. Everybody was terrified that Michael Jackson was going to motivate people to riot.
That was the most gangster song of 1996. He said,
I was, sue me.
Everybody used me. Go back and listen to the History album.
Kick me, kike me.
Kike me, yes.
I was in Bahia. He did a Kanye. I was in Brazil. I was in Bahia. I literally came in the same day as Michael Jackson. And the whole people were afraid that Michael Jackson was going to set off the poor people to have a race riot. That's how afraid people were of Michael Jackson. Yeah, I didn't know that story. That they suppressed that story. The people in Brazil, they thought Michael Jackson gonna start a black revolution up in there. That's crazy.
Let
People were
me tell you a
scared.
quick let me tell you a quick little story. I want to say two things before we get too far away from what you said. I want to get back to that when you talked about Michael Jackson and you talked about like the when you talked about the live music earlier. And this is a story, and I don't tell this story too often. But in the studio, when we talk about the live music being taken, um, I remember there was a story I heard about it a long time ago. It's something called the White Paper Report, and this is alleged. Okay, for the
You mean the
people who are
Harvard,
listening,
the Harvard report?
yeah. Remember I asked you about that
Yeah,
because
it's hard to find. They make it very
it's hard.
hard to find.
It's hard to find. Well, in that report, for those of you listening, there was a concerted effort to take the live sound out of our music and to take the feel out of it. And they started with the drums. And this is a story that I heard from a producer of the time. Dick Gregory came down to Motown Studios one day in the early 80s, and Dick Gregory actually had the report. So what Dick Gregory did was he passed it around to everybody. Because Dick Gregory, his philosophy was if they know I have it, they'll kill me. But if everybody has it, they can't just target me. If they kill me, everyone still got it. And so he actually got a paper with this report. He was in the studio with Lionel, and Dick Gregory came down and showed him the report. He said he looked at the motherfucker and threw it in the trash because he didn't want them folks coming after him. But he did see the report. And this was a real thing. So we're not talking about some pseudo nonsense. This is something that happened, and the evidence is what we get out of it. The fact that you see, if you listen to a song from 1979, and you listen to a song from 1984, it's in that 5 year period. It's like you're listening to something a completely different world of music that literally did not exist 5 years prior to it. So that doesn't happen out of happenstance. No one ever said, "Hey, I don't want to hear live drums anymore." Nobody ever said, "Get that bass guitar out of here. Get those strings in the background. Get them out of here." No one ever said that. No one ever asked for that. So you got to ask yourself, why did it happen? So when we're talking about Michael Jackson and the era, and when it comes to the music of the time and what's going on in the world, Michael Jackson, by the time we get to the History album in 1996, you know, is that this is mind you, 96 is what we call the zenith of hip hop. This is when Biggie and Tupac are still alive. This is when Outkast is dropping music. This is when hip hop is at its zenith. The best album that year was still History. The most gangster album that year was still History. In that album, if you go back and listen to that song, and then go back on IncenseandAshtrays.com, I did a breakdown of the History album on the episode of Incense and Ashtrays where I talked about the militancy within Michael Jackson's music. When Michael Jackson talked about, he was telling you who the district attorney was and calling him out by name and thumbing at the district attorney for not getting them put in jail. He was calling out the Vanderbilts and in the song called Money. He was calling out what was going on with the industry. He was telling you who the people running this game is, and how they ain't got our best interests at heart. And he went back and he did use the technology of the day, but he made sure to bring live music. Michael Jackson, another thing that he did, he used choirs. The song, when you listen to the Earth song, What About Us? That's a choir. When you go back to the Bad album, A Man in the Mirror, choirs. There is something that has to be said about our music. When we have 30 voices, 40 voices singing in harmony at once, it does something for your spirit. It lifts your soul. And that's why they push, when Dr. Short talked about the hip hop thing, is not to shit on hip hop. It's the fact that they know this is a lower vibration form of music that's not going to get you off your ass to do anything. Now, when it did have that vibration in the early 90s, they got that style of hip hop all the way the fuck up out of here. It was gone by 96. That was trying to spend money on hoes and clothes. So these elements, when we're talking about R&B music, when it's done right, R&B was never kicked out. The people never rejected R&B. R&B was defunded. R&B was sabotaged. Hip hop was pushed at the expense of R&B. And for that, if one of my mods in here, Star, I know you in here, if you can put it in the chat room, I did a 3-part series talking about how R&B was literally defunded to push this lower vibration form of music. And it's
And
not the
Brother
and it's
Dewan,
not to say I'm
there's a
ending this
good
one part out. Go ahead. I'm ending this one
There,
part out.
there's
Let me
a,
get right
there's
back
a
to you.
good book by Nelson George called The Death of Rhythm and Blues. And he talks about
Yes.
how people that were selling, they were told, we don't even want to get the sales. We want this music gone. And you will see this happen with soul music. If you saw, they just came out that the FBI had been hounding Aretha Franklin for her entire career. You
40
wonder why
years.
Aretha Franklin all of a sudden had a hit every so many weeks. Then all of a sudden, none of the radio stations would play her songs, no matter what she did. Disco, country, just they wanted her gone. This isn't that the artist ceased to be any good. They
And
decided
it's they sabotage.
to
I want
break
to
the
make this I
commercial
want to make
back
this
of the artist.
I want to make the end of this point, then I'm gonna get right back to that. When it comes to our music, we've always had a diverse palette as black listeners. They've herded us like sheep over these last 30 years into one sound, and it happened slowly, and it happened at the expense of R&B. So what we're saying here is not to crap on any sound, and it's not to say that hip hop can't be great. When you listen to Kendrick Lamar's "To Pimp a Butterfly" with that live sound, with that full, you can get the same thing out of hip hop, especially when you go back to the early 90s stuff. A lot of the Outkast stuff had a live bass, a live sound, background singers, a lot of soul to it. A lot of the early Death Row stuff had that live feel to it. The Mary Jane Girls. So hip hop can be done at a standard that can reach R&B, but the way it's done now, the way it's pushed, it's just not going to happen, and it's done like that on purpose. Because when you listen to a monotone voice through auto tune and a program beat, all it's doing is programming your mind into a loop. So that's something that we just trying to bring consciousness to and highlight the greatness of Michael Jackson and R&B music and what it does to you when music is done right. But go ahead, Dr. Short. Back
So
to what
no,
you were already saying.
I was just saying the death of R&B. Nelson George is a wonderful music critic. I used to read his column in Billboard every week for many years,
I met
and
him at a Miles Davis concert a couple months ago.
they do everything that they can to kill music. It's the same way. There's a very good song. At the height of their powers, the OJs had a song, Power to the People. Give the people what they want. Da, da, da. It's a great song. It's funky. And you know what? It went to number one, R&B, and it only went to about 85 on the Hot 100. This is after they'd had all these hits. They didn't like the message, Power to the People, so they killed the song. Even the man that just passed, I was talking to you about it, Ivy Joe Hunter, a Facebook friend of mine who certainly knew Mr. Carmichael, who was one of the Motown producers who produced the song Dancing in the Streets. Whatever was the number one song when Dancing in the Streets was cut, I can look it up. It is nowhere as popular as Dancing in the Streets was then or now. So why wasn't Dancing in the Streets a number one record? It's because they interpreted that as black people wanting to riot against white people. So therefore, it's not a number one record. It's number two. And so they're very concerned that we communicate through music. They understand the power of music. They understand to deny people certain sorts of music. Even these generations, band used to be a requirement in a lot of public schools. And then all of a sudden in the 80s and 90s, they removed band music. They took music. They also took the trades and things that people needed, they took away systematically all over the country all at one time. And they replaced it with drugs, prisons, gayness, baby killing. There's an assault to exterminate us as a people, culturally, mentally, and the music is part of it, which is why you hear me complain. Lizzo has talent, but I guess she can't make it without being a stupid, obese slut with her ass exposed instead of playing the damn flute. Maybe she should stick herself with it too. But I mean, do that in private. You start to see this absurdity. You see this everywhere. This is people making fun of us. And with all due respect, a lot of the clowns happen to be women these days. And of course, we seem to not be able to tell when people are laughing at us instead of laughing with us. So even Flavor Flav, I mean, who's a modern day pickaninny, whether you like him or not, we have all of these coon and minstrel and mammy and bedwench type figures. And this is to continue mental slavery. And the soundtrack of the people who make the stupid music, it's the same way Luther Vandross was refused contracts by literally every single solitary record label after having made huge amounts of money singing jingles, singing behind David Bowie, all of this, and he couldn't be considered. He was even with a group that had decent sized hits. And people were telling him, again, the white executive types, nobody would listen to a fat black dude sing. This is after Barry White had one platinum record after the other from about 71 until 78. Y'all get me. And even Barry White's an example of a great musician who they decided to cancel.
Yep. Took his orchestra away.
They cancel people, they invent something. They're in the process of canceling Kanye West. But again, a lot of the times what happens with our black artists is that they somehow see themselves as individuals. The Ku Klux Klan doesn't want to lynch you because you're an individual. They want to lynch you because you're part of a race. You're part of a people. We have a real problem with this, that we sort of want to get away from the masses of us instead of uplifting the larger group. And our musicians get out there and they get into trouble. I'll give you another example of an artist that was too influential. Dionne Warwick, a wonderful singer. They still can sing. Her birthday's December 12th. I think she'll be 82 if she lives. Dionne Warwick did a couple of things, in particular talking about slavery. She did a thing talking about slavery, and I don't think they ever quite trusted her anymore. And it wasn't like Dionne Warwick's out every day protesting, fighting against white folks. That's not how it's been. But Dionne Warwick went to Warner Brothers with the largest contract ever awarded to a black female singer or black artist of any kind. $5 million. That's big money in 1970s money. In fact, can someone tell me what that is? Or do y'all want me to extrapolate what $5 million to an artist in 1970? What would that have been? Let me see if I can beat you guys to it.
About 30 million now.
$30 million. Damn. And if you adjust it for inflation, it's more. Dionne Warwick got the same size contract that they offered Janet Jackson when she went to Virgin. But they didn't want, frankly, Dionne Warwick, she's an example of what happened to Michael Jackson. They had the exact same phenomenon at different points. From 1969 to 72, Dionne Warwick was the most formatted female artist in the United States. That means that she was the queen of the radio when I was a kid for a couple of years. Bigger than Aretha Franklin or Diana Ross or anybody for almost 3 years. Then they broke her legs when she went to Warner Brothers. All of a sudden, nobody wanted to hear anything she had to say. And she ended up having to go to Clive Davis, Dwan, to be heard again.
Oh Lord, you know what that means.
Yes, yeah. Well, basically, but this is what happened with a lot of people. They even got the big contracts.
And that's what they do. That's usually how it happens. It's like when they sign that big deal. It's almost like they give them some money to shut up. That's happened with Barry White. When Barry White got that big deal in the early '80s, It was done. It was over. He came back. He came back with the Secret Garden, and he had some show you right. He had some moderate hits, but it wasn't nothing like 1976 Barry White. And so, and they did the same thing. And it's like they'll get money, and that'll be basically. Look what happened with Jill Scott. Jill Scott signed that big deal with CBS. She came out with the Woman album, I think, back in 2015, and we haven't heard anything from Jill Scott since. And then Jill Scott released, she released two really good albums back in 2014, 2012,
Hmm.
and they gave Adele all the attention. Adele got all the Grammys. Adele got all the attention.
And they did the same thing with Najee, and they got the little sorry punk. What's his name? Kenny. It should be Kenny G for gay. They gave Kenny G, and they got rid of Najee, the much better musician. By the way,
Yeah,
$5 million in 1970 money is the equivalent of $38 million in today's money.
oh,
They gave
shit.
Dionne Warwick a shitload of money, but they did not help her at all. And it's the same thing when Diana Ross had the $25 million or $20 million. That they gave her $20 million in 1980 for her to like leave Motown, right?
Uh-huh.
And she only had two albums, really one that did well. They often don't want you to do anything. They want you to kind of like, shut up.
And
Like,
and her biggest hit, I think, after that was what she did with Mr. Carmichael. She did "Missing You." That song they did with Marvin Gaye about Marvin Gaye. She had to
yes, I remember.
basically she had to link back up with the Motown talent to get it to make it pop off.
Right.
Um,
And look at this. The value that they gave it's about $90 million to Diana Ross.
yeah, and so they'll do that. But Dr. Short, I don't want to be here all night. But I know people got somewhere to
Let's
go.
take some questions.
Yeah,
Treat these people.
if you have any questions, both my moms got kicked off. I don't know. It was some stuff going on with Eve's Twitter,
Mhm. Oh,
and
okay. And do a
Twitter's
commercial.
on the.
Um,
And please, Doctor, donate Dr. Randy Short, $ Doctor Dr. Randy Short for Cash App, for his Venmo, and for his PayPal, and email the letter W, Randy Short at gmail.com.
yes,
If you want to hear
treat me
my
like a
Cash App,
treat me like a white scholar. Yeah, it's
if you want to hear my Cash App, it's $Dwan. You see what it's spelled? But it said Dwan B. It's Dwan Brown. My name is Dwan Brown, but I go by Dwan B because that was the Twitter handle that was available when I signed up for Twitter, and it just took off. But I'm Dwan Brown, and that'll be the Cash App. Dwan B on YouTube. You can put at Dwan B on YouTube. It's easy to find my YouTube channel because they now let you personalize your handle. So YouTube.com / Dwan B, or just type in at Dwan B on YouTube. You will get. We will be doing. I'll be interviewing um, Miss Stevens. She was a background singer for Michael Jackson, celebrating Thriller 40. Thriller 40. You can do at Dwan B on Mixcloud. That's where we'll be doing our celebrating Thriller, and I'll be playing the whole album live, breaking down every song, the personnel, instrumentation, breaking
My
down a lot
test
of,
tube babies,
and I'll be
thank
doing,
you.
and
My
I'll be
test
doing
tube
that
babies, thank you.
I'll
The
be doing that
Petri
on
dish,
Mixcloud.
thanks you.
Hold on. I'll be doing that on Mixcloud, mixcloud.com/DewanB. Incense and Ashtrays on Apple Podcasts, Incense and Ashtrays on Spotify, all that good shit. Um, I know I'm about to be there. I gotta get going. So, Dr. Short, I want you to close it out however you want to close it out. Wherever you want to say ending, talking about Michael Jackson, wherever you want to take it,
Oh
go
my
right
God,
ahead. The floor is yours.
you're falling asleep.
uh-oh.
Yeah.
Okay. And they kicked the other two people out. Oh my God.
Yeah, Twitter's. I'm like, it's only so much time for it because it's been tripping all night. So it's only so much time before they kick us off. So I was going to go ahead and end it
Well,
before they do.
what to me, yeah, if they're going to kick it off, but there may be a question. If it's a burning question, I'll defer to the audience if they do. If I can take it, you think we
If
can
they
take them?
asking, No, I've already asked. I'm not getting any, so I'm not sure if they're asking or if they're not coming
Okay.
through. But there's some
Okay.
shit going on
Okay.
because both my odds got fucked off. So there's some shit going on with Twitter. But go ahead.
Oh yeah. Well, so they're going to shut us down. Well, let me just say this to you guys. Dwan B is awesome. It's nice to work with him. Please continue to follow this. We're going to do more stuff. We still haven't talked about Lamont Dozier. We haven't talked about this Ivy Joe Hunter, who just passed. We'll be talking about Black music. We'll be doing more conversations about this. And so please bear with us. This is Twitter that's messing with us, not us. Charge it to their heart and head, not ours. But I just want to say to you, one of the greatest times of my life was having an original Sony Walkman, and I'm listening to both Off the Wall, switching tapes out of my Sony Walkman, listening to Off the Wall and to Thriller, walking past the Eiffel Tower, Bing, and the Champs-Élysées, and also getting in trouble in my hotel room in the Chateau Frontenac, blasting Michael Jackson, getting down in my hotel room, which was hilarious. And I just imagine that you're in France, I'm traveling, I'm in Africa, listening to Michael Jackson, being in Senegal and being in Niger and Mali and hearing Michael Jackson. It's hard to forget. And me even doing the moonwalk when I was in Dakar. And of course, people says that's just a camel walk. I says, but that's for your generation. Michael Jackson was a gift. We shouldn't let people who hate us symbolically destroy and diminish him, because what they really want to do is destroy all of us. We should stand by people who stood by us. And when someone accomplishes something, be proud of it. If white folks can be proud of Confederate people that caused 1 million+ people to die in this country, to destroy this country and put up monuments for very flawed, wicked people, surely we can stand by Michael Jackson, and yes, even crazy Kanye West, who I've known 32 years. In reality, they don't like any of us. We better start liking ourselves and being able to see people instead of the flaws in people. So before they shut us off, you can always reach out to Brother Dwan B and I. Also, email. I always try to answer questions, wrandyshort@gmail.com, which is my Zelle and PayPal too. And of course, bless us, because we want to do more. We're going to be much bigger. And I just want to encourage everybody. Part of reparations is getting control. Some of this technology that they're using to screw us with, we're the ones that laid this stuff down. We should be in control of some of it. And we should no longer allow people to treat us like we're less than anyone. We're great people. We're significant people. We've made an impact and we've contributed to the whole universe. And we need to feel good about that. We need to celebrate good things. And it's not just Thriller. I guess we can do other albums in the future. Bodyguard. I want to do a Where Did Our Love Go? I'd like to do a retrospective on Motown in general, Brother Dwan, and just talk about these people.
Yes, we gotta do that.
So, love you guys. Get some rest. Definitely bless us. I mean, whenever people give me stuff, I just plow it into my library. So, if you like what you hear, every little contribution just helps me get another record or another book so I can share. I'm at Dr. Randy Short. And Brother Dwan, tell them yours, and we're going to check out. We love everybody. We love your support. We love every one of our listeners.
Yeah, we do. I appreciate everybody. We did it on Twitter Spaces instead of YouTube tonight because I wanted to get some of you guys' comments and stuff. But yeah, the comment thing ain't been working tonight. So if you've been raising your hand, didn't see it. Both my mods, I just got inbox from both of my mods. They both got kicked out. So I don't know what the hell Twitter doing. So
and they kicked me out at a certain point. You didn't see it, so it's like that's okay. It's homeland insecurity, but we're secure. We're too black, too strong, too proud to give up. Up yours, white supremacy.
And the original link when I set the original link up, we had like over 100 ready to come, and then when I went live, it didn't work. I had like
But
canceled
do
the
you know,
original
I
link.
didn't get the alert. I
Yeah,
couldn't find you on Twitter when you sent.
yeah,
You had to send me a text because I couldn't. I went to your page. I couldn't find it.
because I had
They,
to I had to cancel the original one that I created. I had to close it out and create a new one. So most of the people who originally responded for reminders for the first one, they don't even know we even doing this shit right now. So yeah,
wow, it's
it
crazy.
is what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, I want to thank y'all, Michael Jackson. You know, when we talk about Michael Jackson, for everyone out there, Michael Jackson is who he is. His place is set in stone.
I'm the
We
greatest.
we
I'm the
we
king of pop
we're
forever.
not
Just
here.
remember that. Just remember. Go with
We're
the
not here
force.
to we're not here to compare him to Beyonce. Let Beyonce be Beyonce. We ain't here to compare him to Chris Brown. Let Chris Brown be Chris Brown. And Michael Jackson be Michael Jackson. His place is set in stone and solid. He earned it. And until we get another artist that's going to make people who can't even fucking speak English cry and pass out after spending $10,000 to go to the concert and passing out 2 minutes into it, until someone else comes along to where 10-year-olds cry when they find out he's gone, and they were born after he was 10 years. They were born after he was dead. If he can impact multiple generations from 80-year-olds to 2-year-olds, when we get an artist that does that, then we may have that conversation. But until we see that effect on the world, let Michael Jackson be who he is. Celebrate 30 or 40. We know when these crackers do their own little fake ass celebrations of Michael Jackson, it's gonna come filled with bullshit and nonsense. You know, play it to the side. You know what I mean? 'Cause you know they got their agendas, and come to places like this because this is where we celebrate it. If you came in late, this whole clip will be up on YouTube, and we will have it up there for you guys to come back and listen, so you can go back and listen to any part of what's been going on. Thank y'all again. Thank you, Dr. Short. I appreciate you, man.
The force goes with you. Good night, everyone.
All right, there are no perfect messengers, only perfect messages for those who wanted to pick up the game. Follow us on YouTube. All right. And I'm also going to have next Tuesday, I'm going to be interviewing Isaiah Washington. He has a movie coming out that he did about Bass Reeves. I'll be interviewing him on next Tuesday on my YouTube channel, Caffeine.